Chapter 165. Helping the Zhu family form a blood pact with the twin-headed snake was considered a success. At that moment, Third Elder and a few of the younger members of the Zhu family came forward and bowed at Lin Jin. Appraiser Lin, it was our arrogance that caused us to offend you. On account of my father's advanced age, please have mercy on us. Third Elder's eldest son led the way and bowed respectfully. Even Third Elder was looking at Lin Jin pitifully. He couldn't say a word as he had been holding it in for the past few days. This was how humans were. When they had something, they wouldn't cherish it. Only when they lost it would they realize how important it was. Had he known that his arrogance would bring him so much trouble, he would never have acted this way. Lin Jin remained silent. The Zhu family's second elder came over to plead for mercy. Lin Jin ignored him as well. In the end, Zhu Tianhong and Zhu Can came to plead for mercy as well. Only then did Lin Jin say, Third Elder might not be able to speak because his heart is burning up and his nose is stuffed up. It's not a big deal. How about this? I'll give you a prescription. Go get some medicine and he should be fine after a few days. The Zhu family could only choose to believe him. Hence, it didn't matter if the medicine worked or not. What mattered was that Lin Jin nodded. That was the key. The Zhu family weren't idiot. Lin Jin didn't even touch Third Elder back then. He merely said, if you can't speak, don't speak anymore. Then, Third Elder couldn't speak anymore. Hence, this could very well be some kind of secret skill. In short, the Zhu family was truly terrified this time. Lin Jin's skill was miraculous and untraceable. Some members of the Zhu family even thought it was some kind of curse. But no matter what it was, they came to a consensus. They must never offend Lin Jin ever again. They could only befriend Appraiser Lin, not offend him. After leaving behind a simple prescription, Lin Jin excused himself. The Zhu family immediately filled up the medicine according to the prescription. Once it was ready, they fed Third Elder a bowl. Needless to say, this bowl was really effective. The Third Elder was actually able to make some vague sounds. It seemed that after a few more bowls, he would be able to speak. Third Elder's family was overjoyed. Tears even streamed down Third Elder's face once again. Last time, he was frightened. This time, he was happy. He was happy after surviving a disaster. By now, Lin Jin was on his way to Mount Zoraku. He was undoubtedly the culprit behind Third Elder's illness. What he used was the coiled wire needle. The coiled wire needle was unpredictable and capable of killing without leaving a trace. It was currently Lin Jin's strongest offensive skill. Similarly, the needle technique was mysterious and had a wide range of uses. Other than attacking, it could also seal acupoints. Most people wouldn't even notice the coiled wire needle sealing an acupoint. Previously, Lin Jin used the coiled wire needle to seal off Third Elder's throat so that he couldn't speak. Lin Jin had unsealed the acupoints earlier, but it would take 2 to 3 days for them to recover. The prescription he prescribed was a simple medicine to soothe the throat and soothe the internal heat. There was no harm in drinking it. What happened to the Zhu family wasn't a big deal. Lin Jin wasn't the type to be unforgiving either. A simple apology was enough. Not to mention, Zhu Can and Zhu Tianhong had to save face as well. Mount Zoraku. The fox cubs' cultivation had improved significantly. Some of them could already learn some low-level spells. Little Five was taught Transfiguration by Lin Jin. Transfiguration was explained in detail in Part 1 of the Demonic Invocation. It was one of the more basic spells. According to ancient legends, plants could turn into spirits and beasts could turn into monsters. Most of them could turn into humans using Transfiguration. With Little Five's cultivation level at rank 3, her progress in cultivating Transfiguration was rapid. After all, she could turn into a human through dream intrusion. In a few more days, Little Five might be able to transform into a human. Shang'er's object manipulation had reached a higher level. She could control more than 10 boulders at the same time. She could also manipulate a blade of grass and use it as a dart. She could even penetrate 3 inches into a boulder from a distance of 10 feet. A higher level of object manipulation should be found in Part 2 of the demonic invocation. Lin Jin didn't have it now, but it wouldn't be long. If he recorded more monsters into the museum, he could trigger the second reward and obtain Part 2 of the demonic invocation. Now, Lin Jin was teaching Xiang'er other spells, including Dark Wind. However, the one who progressed the fastest was the Great White Ape. Apes were the closest to humans, so in terms of intelligence, they had an advantage over other wild beasts. This was very obvious when it came to cultivation. After several days of cultivation, the Great White Ape had grasped the basics of transfiguration. He could even change his size for a short period of time, shrinking to the size of a regular ape. This was the key. Lin Jin had even asked around the government today, and learned that the City Lord Manor hadn't given up on searching for the Great White Ape. The Grassy Continent's caravan must be doing the same. They would find Mount Zoraku sooner or later, so they had to be careful. Fortunately, even if Lin Jin wasn't around during the day, Xiang'er would still guide the Great White Ape in cultivation. Moreover, the Great White Ape's starting point was much higher than Xiang'er and the other fox monsters. It started off as a rank 3, and if it could complete the first 3 parts of the beast energy formation, it could definitely advance to rank 4. Lin Jin personally taught the Great White Ape. The Great Ape bowed solemnly. After several days of learning human etiquette, he was now very familiar with it. Ignoring his wild body and beastly appearance, the Great White Ape's behavior was no different from a human's. Lin Jin's teachings were based on the detailed explanations of spells found in the Museum of Deadly Beasts. It was equivalent to having been refined by countless experts, so it was naturally easier to understand. As if he was under the guidance of a master, the Great White Ape improved even more. After he was done, Lin Jin had the Great White Ape perform transfiguration. The latter was already very familiar with the process. Boom! A puff of white smoke was emitted and the Great White Ape's body shrank. A gust of wind blew past and the demonic aura dissipated. The Great White Ape had reverted back to a normal-sized ape. Let's see how long you can last this time. Lin Jin used a branch in his hand to rhythmically knock on the tree trunk beside him. The hollow sound echoed. The last time Lin Jin tried, the Great White Ape could last 76 times. Now that his cultivation had improved, he should be able to improve even more. However, an eagle's cry suddenly came from the sky. Lin Jin's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He immediately had Xiang'er hide in the cave with the little fox. The next instant 2 large eagles flew down from above. One of them was covered in yellow feathers and was shrouded in a sandstorm. It was even larger in size. Standing on the back of this large yellow eagle was a tall figure. It was obvious that he was a native of the Grassy Continent. The other eagle was a regular eagle, but when it spread its wings, it had a wingspan of 20 feet. On its back was a lieutenant of Maple City's city guard. Lin Jin had met them a few times. Their arrival was so sudden that Lin Jin didn't even have time to dodge. Of course, the Great White Ape didn't have time to hide either. Just like that, he was exposed to the 2 eagles. Lin Jin reacted quickly. He got up and put his hands behind his back. He secretly gestured to Xiang'er in the cave, telling her not to let the little fox out, including herself. As for the Great White Ape, now that he had been exposed, he couldn't act recklessly. Fortunately, the Great White Ape was currently using transfiguration. Lin Jin stopped knocking on the tree trunk. Instead, he grabbed a branch and gently tapped it against the hem of his clothes, silently counting down. He could only hope that the Great White Ape could last a little longer. Otherwise, he would definitely be exposed. When that happened, Lin Jin didn't know what to do either. He was panicking. However, it was hard to tell from his appearance. He took the initiative to go up to them. Halfway there, he recalled the lieutenant's name. "Lieutenant Guo, what are you doing?" Lin Jin looked calm. Not only was he calm, but he also looked displeased. It was as if someone had interrupted his fun. The lieutenant on the gray-feathered eagle took a closer look and recognized Lin Jin. He leaped down from the eagle and saluted Lin Jin. So it's Appraiser Lin. The current Lin Jin was completely different from before. Just his identity as a rank 2 beast appraiser was enough to garner respect. Not to mention, Lin Jin was currently at the top of his game in the Beast Appraisal Association. He also had a good relationship with the City Lord Manor's steward Zhua. Hence, even the captain of the city guards was courteous to Lin Jin. Just then, the grassy continent native on the other yellow eagle leaped down. Chapter 166. Lin Jin gave him a sidelong glance. He mused, grassy continent natives sure are tall. With that physique, even his arms are thicker than my thighs. In the modern world, he'd be a muscle man. The grassy continent natives weren't particular about etiquette. With a suspicious gaze, he glared at Lin Jin. What are you doing here in the middle of the night? Pretty rude. Lin Jin frowned and his expression darkened. Ignoring the man, he turned to Lieutenant Guo and asked, "What's this boorish man doing here?" One was rude and the other was even less so. The grassy continent native knew that boorish man wasn't a good word and was about to lash out when Lieutenant Guo quickly said, "Appraiser Lin, this is the expert hunter hired by the grassy continent's caravan, Rubba." Lin Jin was stunned. "What's his name?" "Rubba. Holy sh*t." Lin Jin almost laughed out loud. This boorish man had such a creative name. His parents were amazing too. "Rubba, go ahead. Why don't you call yourself Lucy instead?" Although he didn't laugh out loud, he couldn't hide the smile on his face. Rubba frowned and asked, "What are you laughing at?" "Nothing." Lin Jin coughed lightly. He couldn't afford to waste any more time. He had to send these two away as soon as possible or else the great white ape might not be able to hold on. "Commandant Guo, this person is very suspicious. In the middle of the night, in this remote mountain forest, it's obvious that he has bad intentions. Maybe he knows the whereabouts of the white-furred ape." It had to be said that this Luoba's sixth sense was quite strong. He guessed it right away. Lieutenant Guo was curious as to what Lin Jin was doing here. Lin Jin said with a straight face, "As an official rank 2 beast appraiser, it's normal for me to come out into the wild to study beast taming and appraising techniques." Lieutenant Guo mused, "Makes sense." Beast appraisers would indeed go out into the wild to familiarize themselves with various beasts. When he explained this to the grassy continent native, Rubba was at a loss for words. "Then, why doesn't he come during the day?" "It's none of your business when I come," Lin Jin said bluntly. His words were blunt, but his logic was clear. What did it matter to him whether he came during the day or night? At that moment, Rubba saw the white ape nearby and was stunned. The white-furred giant ape used a transformation technique. At this time, its body size was no different from that of a normal ape, but the white fur on its body did not change. Rubba's eyes were filled with suspicion, and he was about to step forward to check. "Stop!" Lin Jin reached out his hand to stop him. "That's an ape I just tamed. Its wild nature hasn't been eradicated yet. Be careful not to hurt you." Rubba understood and laughed maniacally. "I can crush a small ape with one hand. But why does this ape have white fur?" Clearly, Rubba was a little puzzled, but that was all. He was not so imaginative as to think that this was the giant ape that had escaped. His physique was different. He was curious and wanted to find out what was going on. Back in the grassy continent, in the wildlands, no one had ever heard of the demonic arts. Even if they had heard of it, they would not have thought about it. At Rubba's words, Lin Jin smirked. "Why does it have white fur?" "You'll have to ask this ape's parents." Lieutenant Guo could tell that Lin Jin was hostile toward the grassy continent native. Perhaps it was discrimination, so he quickly came over to smooth things over. He simply asked Lin Jin if he had seen a giant white ape. Lin Jin pointed at the ape on purpose. Isn't this it? Rubba was enraged again. Lieutenant Gua. He wanted to leave. If he stayed any longer, these two would surely start fighting. Appraiser Lin, if you find any traces of a giant ape, you mustn't force yourself. You must inform the city lord manor first, Lieutenant Gua reminded before he left. Lin Jin nodded. He was extremely anxious, hoping that the other party would leave as soon as possible. Silently counting, he had exceeded 112, far exceeding the limit of the white ape's transformation technique. The white ape must be having a hard time now, and there was a chance that he could transform back at any moment. If he was exposed, things would get messy. Fortunately, the two eagles took to the air. Unable to hold back any longer, the white ape broke the spell and reverted to his original size. Lin Jin wiped off the cold sweat on his forehead. Fortunately, it was a close shave. After getting away with it, this area should be safe for the time being. Of course, he couldn't rule out the possibility of the other party returning to investigate. Lin Jin walked over and patted the giant ape's head, saying, "See that? I'm taking a huge risk to help you. You should focus on learning spells, and when you can maintain your transformation skills for a long period of time, you'll be able to truly escape from danger." The giant ape was smart and nodded. Shang'er and the others came out of the cave too. As Lin Jin looked at the monsters, he had one thought on his mind. Letting Shang'er and the others stay on Mount Zoraku wasn't a long-term solution. Although this place was deserted, it wasn't a real forest. If they were exposed, the consequences would be unimaginable. Although Lin Jin was quite capable and Shang'er little 5, and the white ape were incredibly powerful, he was still alone. If he had the chance, he would have to find a safer place. However, staying on Mount Zoraku for the time being wasn't a problem as long as he didn't get himself killed. At the Friar Association, Yang Jie waited respectfully outside Yi Yuzhou's seclusion room. After a moment, Yi Yuzhou pushed open the door and came out, looking high-spirited. It had been a long time since Yi Yuzhou had this expression on his face. His cultivation and pet beasts level had stagnated several years ago. Because of this, Yi Yuzhou had thought of various ways to break through the bottleneck. Whether it was himself or his pet beast, the flood dragon beast. If he could break through any one of them, his strength would increase by leaps and bounds. However, his repeated failures had left Yi Yuzhou disheartened. He might never be able to break through his bottleneck in this lifetime, especially his pet beast. His flood dragon had a water attribute and could control clouds. However, its potential wasn't great. In the words of an experienced beast appraiser, the fact that it could evolve into rank 4 meant that it had reached its limit. In Jade Dragon Kingdom, Yi Yuzhou was definitely an expert, strong enough to rank within the top 5. If his flood dragon evolved, he would undoubtedly become Jade Dragon Kingdom's #1 expert. In fact, the entire Jade Dragon Kingdom might even have a chance of becoming a premium country. This was definitely a huge deal. Over the years, the top experts of Jade Dragon Kingdom had been trying to find ways to evolve, each of them holding back. Initially, Yi Yuzhou didn't even dare to think about this, but now, he saw a path. The curator was guiding him on this path. If he followed this path, his flood dragon would have a chance of evolving into rank 5. Of course, it wasn't easy for a rank 4 pet beast to evolve into rank 5. Even if there was a way, it would take a long time to prepare and break through step by step. The most important thing was to choose the right path. Yi Yuzhou knew that the path he was taking now was the right one. In the past few days of seclusion, he had been studying the evaluation report the curator gave him. In other words, the evolution method mentioned in the report was feasible. He had tested it himself. However, it required a lot of precious materials, including elixirs, high-grade spirit stones, and some natural treasures. This was normal because a rank 4 pet beast evolving into rank 5 required a huge amount of financial support. In some places, the entire country's resources would be used to help the pet beast evolve. The situation in Jade Dragon Kingdom was a little different, but if Yi Yujo was confident in evolving his pet beast, he could apply for some resources. In short, his pet beast's evolution path had finally been opened. Next, it would be time to accumulate and finally break through. This process could take a few years or a few months. Chapter 167. Seeing Yi Yujo in high spirits, Yang Jie was also very happy. Teacher. Yang Jie bowed. Yi Yujo nodded. Yang Jie, I was fortunate enough to come across a great opportunity. I've been in seclusion for the past few days, so I forgot to give you some guidance on spells and cultivation. Yang Jie quickly said, I'm not in a hurry. Teacher, your opportunity is more important. May I know what kind of opportunity you received? He was curious as well. After all, Yang Jie had been cultivating with Yi Yujo for such a long time, but he had never seen Yi Yujo so happy. Yi Yujo laughed. It's about my pet beast's evolution method. Yang Jie's eyes lit up at this, revealing a look of pleasant surprise. Could it be that teacher has figured out a pet beast evolution method? Yi Yujo blushed at this. He clearly had a method, but it wasn't something he came up with himself. At the thought of that mysterious curator, Yi Yujo sighed inwardly. To think such a powerful figure existed in this world. Yi Yujo was a righteous man, so he wouldn't claim credit for something that wasn't his doing. I do have an evolution method, but I didn't figure it out on my own. Instead, I received guidance from an expert, Yi Yujo said. Though he was being honest, his words made one's imagination run wild. To Yang Jie, Yi Yujo was already a top-notch expert in Jade Dragon Kingdom. There were only a handful of people in the entire kingdom who could surpass Yi Yujo. Who could it be that Yi Yujo referred to as an expert? Teacher, that expert. Yang Jie wanted to probe further, but Yi Yujo waved his hand. I can't tell you the details for now. Right, give me the white peacock's feather. Next time, I'll help you request an evolution method for your pet beast. Your pet beast is rank 3, so it's relatively easy to evolve from rank 3 to rank 4. Who knows, it might even succeed before the Disciples' Tournament this time. Yang Jie was overjoyed at this. He quickly plucked a feather from his pet beast and handed it to Yi Yujo. His pet beast had been stuck at rank 3 for a long time now. Normally, it would be extremely difficult for the white peacock to evolve. After all, its bloodline wasn't as good as his teacher's soaring cloud flood dragon, and its potential was lacking. However, it was not impossible. It was just that it might take several years, or even longer. It would be better if he could show signs of evolution earlier. If his white jade sparrow really evolved into rank 4, Yang Jie's status would surely rise. Even in the entire Jade Dragon Kingdom, he would be considered one of the top figures. Next, Yi Yujo gave Yang Jie pointers on his cultivation and spells. He even taught Yi Yujo the third form of the Finger Chi sword technique. This was an advanced spell of the Spirit Chi finger. It could break rocks from a distance and was extremely powerful. In the past, Yang Jie wanted to learn, but Yi Yujo never taught him. Today, Yang Jie finally got his wish. However, after he finished learning, Yang Jie learned something from the mouths of others. At that moment, his expression turned ugly. It was still about Lin Jin. It was said that Lin Jin had announced that he was here at the Friar Association to win first place in this year's Disciple Tournament. Moreover, news about Lin Jin was also spreading like wildfire. For example, Lin Jin had been improving by leaps and bounds, achieving Blood Contract 4th Realm on his initial assessment. He was stronger than Yang Jie back then. Another example was how Lin Jin made friends in the Friar Association. Not only did he have a good relationship with Lu Yunhe, but he also had a good relationship with the number 2 disciple, Shui Bao. However, Yang Jie was the only person he didn't like. There was also the rumor that Lin Jin and Yang Jie were fighting over a woman. In short, Lin Jin seemed to be targeting Yang Jie. Almost everyone in the Friar Association knew about this. Most of them just wanted to watch a good show. At first, they didn't know who Lin Jin was. Later, when the rumor that Lin Jin and Yang Jie were fighting over a woman spread, they thought Lin Jin was shamelessly using Yang Jie's fame to boost his own fame. But later on, the situation was different. When everyone learned who Lin Jin was and that he was a rank 2 beast appraiser, and that Lin Jin had achieved blood contract 4th realm on his initial assessment, Lin Jin's status instantly rose to the same level as Yang Jie's. Even in the Friar Association, quite a number of people had begun to admire and support Lin Jin. If an incompetent person tried to talk big, he would be called an idiot and a laughingstock. But if a capable person tried to talk big, he would be deserving of the title. The key was still strength. Lin Jin had proven himself on this point, so this time, everyone believed the rumor. Even Yang Jie believed it. Come to think of it, Lin Jin's sudden entry into the Friar Association might really be to win first place in the Disciples' Tournament. However, this first place had always been Yang Jie's exclusive possession. Yang Jie treated it as his personal possession. Who could be happy when someone wanted to snatch away your personal possession? Even if it was for the sake of his reputation, Yang Jie couldn't just hand over this first place to someone else. The Disciples' Tournament will be held in a few days. Since he wants to win first place, let's see who's stronger in the Colosseum, Yang Jie mumbled to himself. While he seemed nonchalant, he was actually infuriated. The Friar Association's Disciples' Tournament was infinitely closer to a real battle. This was also a tradition of the Friar Association. In the past few tournaments, many disciples had been injured or even severely injured. As long as no lives were lost, it was fine. Sometimes, the Disciples' Tournament would become a platform for disciples to settle their personal grudges. Those who were injured were usually those who had grudges with their subordinate. Yang Jie had made up his mind to teach Lin Jin a lesson during the Disciples' Tournament. He wanted to let Lin Jin know the consequences of provoking him. Lin Jin wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Somewhere in the Friar Association, Chen Cheng was listening to a few of his trusted aides' reports. They were the ones who started all the rumors about Lin Jin. These people had received benefits from Chen Cheng, so they were very loyal to him. Senior brother Chen, don't worry. We brothers will definitely do a good job for you, one of the disciples said with a chuckle. The others echoed in agreement. However, Chen Cheng shook his head. Some rumors might work, but I don't think they're enough. Those people were stunned, not understanding what was going on. Chen Cheng continued, I know Senior Yang well. He's an intelligent man. He'll take these rumors to heart, but he'll also be suspicious. Lin Jin is currently in the limelight and besides Senior Yang, no one else can do anything about him. Hence, we need to deepen the conflict between them. It'd be best if it's a fight to the death. This request was obviously a little too much. For people who only knew how to create and spread rumors, they wouldn't be able to get this job done. Chen Cheng smirked. You don't have to worry about that. I've already thought it through. Senior Yang Jie values his reputation and reputation the most. A mere rumor isn't lethal enough. If Lin Jin really does something that tarnishes his reputation, the conflict between them will be irreconcilable. When that happens, do you think Senior Yang Jie wouldn't show mercy during the tournament? Chen Cheng sneered. But how do we get Lin Jin to cause trouble for Senior Yang? He definitely won't do it, right? The men looked puzzled. It's simple. First, we can help Lin Jin build up his reputation so that it's closer to Senior Yang's. There can't be two tigers on the same mountain, so Senior Yang won't be happy about it. Also, I've already used my connections to have the assistant lecturer in charge of the public lecture replace Senior Yang Jie's lecture with Lin Jin. At Chen Cheng's words, the group gasped in shock. That would work. Although Chen Qing didn't mention how he managed to get the assistant lecturer in charge to replace the main lecturer, he must have spent quite a bit of money. Just this alone was enough to touch Yang Jie's sore spot. The Friar Association would hold a public lecture for its disciples every month. They would pick a disciple with profound cultivation and extensive knowledge to give a lecture to all the other disciples. This was an absolute honor. In a sense, a disciple who could give a lecture on stage could be considered half an assistant lecturer. What an honor! In the past, this kind of transcendental honor only belonged to Yang Jie. It seemed that there was only one time when Lu Yunhe was allowed to give a lecture, but the results were not good. Later on, Lu Yunhe was not allowed to give a lecture. As for the disciple Schwebauer, although her cultivation was high, her personality was clearly not suitable for giving lectures, so this honor had always been monopolized by Yang Jie. Chen Qing and Yang Jie had been fellow disciples for many years, so he had a good understanding of Yang Jie's personality. To Yang Jie, the right to give a lecture was his. It was like a personal possession. If anyone tried to snatch it away, Yang Jie would definitely be enraged and retaliate. It was because of this understanding that Chen Qing chose to do this. The benefits weren't limited to angering Yang Jie. One should know that giving a lecture, especially in front of all the disciples, required genuine knowledge. Lu Yunhe had once given a lecture, but the results weren't great because he was lacking in this area. After all, learning well on one's own and teaching others were two different things. In Chen Qing's opinion, Lin Jin's knowledge was still shallow. If he were to give a lecture on stage, he would surely make a lot of mistakes. If he panicked, Lin Jin might even embarrass himself. When that happened, Chen Qing would arrange for someone to pick on Lin Jin on purpose. All in all, he wanted to embarrass Lin Jin in front of everyone. With this, he could mess with Lin Jin and provoke Yang Jie at the same time. Killing two birds with one stone. It was a perfect plan. At the thought of this, Chen Qing couldn't help but sigh. If he had been born in the chaotic times of ancient times, he would surely be a military advisor. Tomorrow will be the day of the lecture. When the time comes, all you have to do is cooperate. Chen Qing instructed in a low voice. His confidants looked at him in admiration. Inwardly they were cursing, this Chen guy is really despicable. How could he come up with such a despicable plan to give birth to a son without an asshole? We mustn't provoke him in the future or we won't even know when we die. After coming up with a plan, Chen Qing left the Friar Association and returned to the Chen family. Chen Wenlin was calculating the profits of his medicine hall. Ever since they started selling pills, the Chen medicine hall's profits had doubled. Admittedly, these pills were extremely profitable. It's no wonder the Sure family could become Maple City's #1 family back then. But this status and respect will belong to our Chen family from now on. Chen Wenlin's eyes were filled with glee. When he saw Chen Qing enter, he laughed heartily. "Qinger, you're back." "Uncle." Chen Qing bowed. Then, he told his uncle about his plan to deal with Lin Jin. Chen Wenlin nodded profusely. "Not bad. Qinger's intelligence is just like mine. Right, don't you think that assistant lecturer's asking for a lot of benefits?" Chen Wenlin was referring to the assistant lecturer in charge of the Friar Association's lectures. Chen Qing replied, "I was afraid that he wouldn't do it. But since he's willing to help, these 800 silvers are worth it." Chen Wenlin thought about it and agreed. "And our Chen Medicine Hall is raking in money every day. A mere 800 silvers is nothing. As long as we can take that Lin Jin down a peg, it'll be worth it." Chen Qing laughed. "Not only will he be humiliated, but I'll also injure him so severely that he'll be bedridden, unable to recover from this setback." Chapter 168. Early in the morning, Lin Jin was summoned back to the Friar Association. The messenger disciple seemed to be in a hurry. When Lin Jin asked what the matter was, the disciple didn't give a clear answer, only saying that Associate Instructor Wang had sent him. Associate Instructor Wang? Lin Jin pondered for a moment. He didn't seem to know this person. Following the disciple to the Friar Association, Lin Jin met Associate Instructor Wang. He was a rather good-natured and slightly plump friar. Beside him was a spirit-eared monkey. He must be the man's pet beast. In the Friar Association, disciples had to be on the 4th realm or below. To become an associate instructor, one had to be on the 5th realm. If they wanted to become an official mentor, they had to be on the 6th realm. Lin Jin was aware of this. Lin Jin, come here. I'm Assistant Lecturer Wang, the person in charge of the association's lectures. Our Friar Association has a tradition. Every month, a disciple will be chosen to give a lecture to all the Friar Association's disciples. Although every disciple has the chance to do so, only those whose blood contract has reached the 4th realm are allowed to do so. Today's lecture has been discussed among us assistants, and we've decided to choose you as the main lecturer. You just need to make some preparations, and when everyone's here, you can go up on stage. Lin Jin nodded and said, I'm Assistant Lecturer Wang. Lin Jin was stunned. It hadn't even been a month since he joined the Friar Association, so he had no idea about this tradition. However, he didn't think too much about it. Associate Instructor Wang had already mentioned that only disciples on the 4th realm could be chosen for the lecture. Since Lin Jin was on the 4th realm, it was only natural that he would be chosen. However, he still had to clarify what he needed to know. Associate Instructor Wang, what should I lecture about? Lin Jin stopped the man from asking. Don't be nervous. Just talk about some cultivation insight. It could be about spells or pet beasts. Of course, the main focus will be on spells. The main thing is to share your understanding of spells with everyone, Associate Instructor Wang said casually before smiling. Assistant Professor Wang said lightly and then smiled. I still have things to do over there. You stay here and prepare. It's about to start. I'll call you up. Having said that, he left. After giving it some thought, Lin Jin decided to talk about it. However, his knowledge on spells was limited. While he could talk about pet beasts, this was the Friar Association, not the Beast Appraisal Association. It wouldn't be appropriate for him to talk about beast appraising here. Currently, Lin Jin was most familiar with 2 spells. One was Fire Spirit Possession, and the other was Spell Negation. In comparison, Lin Jin was more familiar with Fire Spirit Possession, so he could talk about it. While Lin Jin was making preparations backstage, more and more disciples arrived at the Friar Association's lecture hall. Many disciples of the Friar Association attached great importance to such lectures, especially since Yang Jie was always the one giving the lectures. Hence, many female disciples came early to secure seat. Sometimes, some teaching assistants and mentors would even listen from below. As time passed, the lecture hall was filled with people. There weren't enough seats. There were also people standing in the corridor and some open spaces. In a corner, Chun had a smug look on his face. He was waiting for the show to begin. Somewhere backstage, Yang Jie was stopped. This made Yang Jie frown. Teaching assistant Wang happened to see it and walked over. Teaching assistant Wang, what's going on? Yang Jie asked in annoyance. He was obviously referring to the matter of him being stopped. Teaching assistant Wang smiled. Yang Jie, we've discussed this month's lecture and we've decided to switch out the main lecturer. Yang Jie was even more displeased. Just as Chun predicted, Yang Jie had long made this lecture his own. For the past 10 months or so, he had been the main lecturer. It would be strange if Yang Jie was happy about this sudden change. However, a disciple's lecture wasn't fixed to just one person. Yang Jie knew this very well. Hence, he suppressed his anger and asked, "Is it Lu Yunhe?" To him, the only person in the entire Friar Association who had the right to compete with him was Lu Yunhe. Of course, in Yang Jie's eyes, Lu Yunhe couldn't even be mentioned in the same breath as him. Teaching assistant Wang shook his head. It's not Lu Yunhe. It's a new disciple, Lin Jin, whose blood contract was on the fourth realm. Yang Jie's expression froze. Lin Jin? Why was it him? At that moment, all the rumors he had heard about Lin Jin flooded his mind. It was hard for him not to care about it now. It was normal for a disciple to be the main lecturer, but in Yang Jie's eyes, Lin Jin was challenging him and even taking away his position as the disciple's main lecturer. His anger surged and he couldn't suppress it no matter how hard he tried. Without another word, Yang Jie walked out with a dark expression. Instead of going back, he went to the lecture hall and found a seat to sit down. He wanted to hear what Lin Jin had to say. If he didn't do well, he shouldn't be blamed for making things difficult for him. When the surrounding disciples saw that Yang Jie was actually sitting below, they were all stunned. Why is Senior Yang sitting down there? I don't know. He's the main lecturer, so he should be on stage. Senior Yang doesn't look too good. Did something happen? Many disciples discussed among themselves. Yang Jie said nothing. His expression was terrifyingly dark. Chen Chen, who was standing nearby, was even more pleased with himself when he saw Yang Jie's expression. There's no need to talk about Lin Jin, but didn't Senior Yang fall into my trap as well? So what if his cultivation level is high? He's still being toyed around by me. Just then, a few sharp-witted people thought of a possibility. The lecture is about to start, but Senior Yang is still sitting down there. This means that Senior Yang isn't the main lecturer this time. I know, it's Senior Lu. Senior Lu? Forget it. Didn't Senior Lu give a lecture last time? The effect was mediocre. Senior Yang is still the most knowledgeable in this field. Even if it's a tricky question, he can answer it with ease. The main lecturer this time isn't Senior Lu either, a disciple said, pointing at Lu Yunhe, who had just entered the lecture hall. Everyone turned to look and were dumbfounded. Lu Yunhe was also sitting in the lecture hall. This meant that he wasn't the main lecturer either. At this, many disciples came to a realization. Could it be Schwebauer? Among the disciples of Maple City's Friar Association, there were only a handful who had reached the fourth realm. If it wasn't Yang Jie or Lu Yunhe, then it was most likely Schwebauer. No one doubted Schwebauer's cultivation level. According to the results of the previous disciple tournament, Schwebauer was second only to Yang Jie and ranked second among the disciples. She was even stronger than Lu Yunhe. Logically speaking, since she had never given a lecture before, it was reasonable for her to do so. But it just didn't make sense. Who didn't know Schwebauer's personality? It was unimaginable to have her give a lecture on stage with a straight face. More and more disciples joined the discussion. Of course, some guessed it was the newly promoted fourth realm expert, Lin Jin. But relatively speaking, Lin Jin had just joined the Friar Association and was still inexperienced. He couldn't possibly be the main lecturer so soon. Schwebauer was here too. She sat down and prepared to listen. With that, Schwebauer could be ruled out as well. Now that almost everyone had arrived, the main lecturer, Lin Jin, stepped forward from the podium. At the sight of Lin Jin, Yang Jie's expression darkened while Chun Qing smirked mischievously. Schwebauer's eyes lit up. It's Senior Lin. The disciples were curious as well. Those who had seen Lin Jin before were fine, but those who had never seen him before were confused, not knowing who the person on the podium was. Lin Jin managed to keep his composure. He walked up to the podium and bowed before saying, "Today, I will be giving a lecture to everyone." A disciple below the podium asked, "Could it be Senior Lin?" Lin Jin nodded. "That's me." Now everyone knew who it was. There was a flurry of discussion. Some were skeptical, thinking that even if Lin Jin was a genius, he might not be qualified to give a lecture on stage. Some were also discussing what Lin Jin would talk about. If his lecture wasn't up to par, wouldn't it be a waste of everyone's time? Some realized that Lin Jin was a rank 2 beast appraiser, so they guessed that his lecture today must be related to pet beasts. After all, this was Lin Jin's area of expertise. Just then, a disciple shouted, "Senior Lin, we know that you're a rank 2 beast appraiser of the Beast Appraisal Association, but this is the Friar Association. If you're going to lecture on pet beasts, there's no need for that. Friars mainly focus on blood contract cultivation and spells. We're more interested in listening to a lecture on this topic." After this disciple said that, someone else immediately chimed in. The disciples who spoke up were Chen Cheng's men. He had painstakingly planned this for 2 reasons. One was to provoke Yang Jie into bearing a grudge against Lin Jin, and the other was to embarrass Lin Jin in front of everyone. If Lin Jin's lecture was all about pet beasts, no one would be able to stop him. Hence, Chen Cheng arranged for his men to do so. However, if Lin Jin insisted on talking about pet beasts, Chen Cheng had a way to stop him. Questions were allowed during the lecture. If Chen Cheng specifically asked for tricky questions about spells, Lin Jin would never be able to answer them. If that happened, it would be hard for him not to embarrass himself. Lin Jin had no intention of talking about pet beasts. He had wanted to talk about the fire spirit possession spell earlier, but after some thought, he gave up on that idea. After all, some of the disciples in the audience must have never cultivated this spell before. Lin Jin figured that since he was going to lecture everyone, he should talk about something basic but insightful. Most importantly, it had to be useful. Currently, the most useful method was to improve one's blood contract realm and spirit energy volume. Lin Jin had learned quite a lot from the Museum of Deadly Beasts. For example, visualization, spirit seizing, vein strengthening, energy formation, inner pellet, any one of these could take him half a day to talk about. Lin Jin planned to talk about visualization. Recently, Lin Jin had been using it for his own cultivation, and it felt great. Even in the ancient era of the immortal Tao, the visualization method was a very basic cultivation method. It was divided into the outer image method and the inner spirit method. In the Museum of Deadly Beasts, visualization could improve one's blood contract level. Hence, there was a very detailed explanation of the spell. If Lin Jin were to talk about it, he might not be able to finish it in a short amount of time. Hence, Lin Jin only planned to talk about external imagery. Chapter 169. Everyone, this is my first time giving a lecture. If I don't do well, please forgive me. Lin Jin said politely. It was just a polite remark, but someone said, "Senior Lin, a genius like you managed to reach the 4th realm on your first assessment. You must have some unique skills in your cultivation, so how could you not do well? Unless you're just trying to brush us off." Something was wrong with this remark. But upon closer inspection, one would realize that there was a hint of hostility in this remark. In other words, if he didn't do well, Lin Jin would be living up to his reputation. Or perhaps he was looking down on them and was just trying to brush them off. Lin Jin glanced at the person who spoke. Without saying anything, he began his lecture. The person who spoke earlier stole a glance at Chen Cheng, and the latter gave him a look of affirmation. It was obvious that Chen Cheng had arranged this person as well. These people Chen Cheng had hired were here to create a ruckus. However, if Lin Jin wanted to nitpick when the lecture started, these people wouldn't be able to do it. When that happened, Chen Cheng would have to step in personally. After all, he was on the 3rd realm and ranked 4th among all the disciples. When it came to spellcasting, he had quite a bit of insight. Once he found a loophole, he would go after it relentlessly. "Oh, Lin Jin, let's see what you're going to talk about." Chen Cheng sneered inwardly. On stage, Lin Jin said, "What I'm going to talk about today is visualization." The disciples below the stage were stunned. Visualization? Never learned it before. Of course, some knowledgeable disciples knew that the visualization method was a cultivation method used by cultivators during the ancient era of immortals. At that time, it was very common. But now, not only were there very few people who learned it, but there weren't many proper cultivation methods left. Not pet beast knowledge? This Lin Jin is digging his own grave. Chen Cheng was overjoyed. He couldn't help but ask, Lin Jin, are you kidding me? I've read about the visualization technique, and I've even tried to cultivate it. To be honest, it's useless. Moreover, there's a copy of this technique in the Spirit Library. Anyone can borrow it. You're giving a public lecture on the visualization technique. Isn't that a little too perfunctory? Chen Cheng obviously wouldn't let go of an opportunity to attack the other party. With Chen Chen taking the lead, a few others immediately chimed in, stirring up the emotions of the disciples. There was indeed a book on visualization in the Spirit Library, and Chen Chen had indeed studied it. However, the conclusion after studying it was that it was useless. After all, this was a cultivation technique from the ancient times. Now that the heaven and earth spiritual qi had dried up and things had changed with the passage of time, there was not even one ancient cultivation technique left. Even if there were some that were left, most of them were incomplete and not suitable for the current blood contract cultivation. If Chen Cheng hadn't studied this visualization method, he wouldn't have dared to make a fuss on the spot. It was because he had studied it that he was confident. He had just started his lecture and was already being questioned. This had never happened before. No matter what, he had to show some respect to the lecturer. Therefore, it was obvious that he was looking for trouble. However, to give a public lecture, one had to be able to withstand the doubts of others. Otherwise, if one's foundation was not solid, how could one give a lecture? If he couldn't explain himself clearly and was stumped by others, he would definitely become a laughingstock. Lin Jin recognized Chen Cheng and knew that the man was deliberately making things difficult for him. However, since Lin Jin dared to go on stage to talk about visualization, he wasn't afraid of anyone making things difficult for him. You'll know if I'm just being perfunctory or not after my lecture. The visualization method I'm going to talk about today is extremely beneficial for blood contract cultivation. It can also increase one's realm, expand one's veins, and increase one's spirit energy. Chen Qing grew even more skeptical after hearing Lin Jin's word. It was just a visualization method, yet he claimed that it could expand one's spirit energy and increase one's spirit energy. Was Lin Jin still dreaming? At most, it was just a method to calm one's mind. If there really was a method that could increase one's blood contract realm, expand one's veins, and increase one's spirit energy, would Lin Jin be so kind as to share it in public? Chen Cheng was already convinced that Lin Jin was just spouting nonsense. That sounds nice, but I don't believe you. Forget about whether you have such a method or not. Even if you did, why would you be so kind as to share it in public? Don't tell me you're just putting on a show. I won't say anything else. Let's all listen carefully and listen to your visualization method. But to be honest, I'm not interested in this method at all. I'm sure today's lecture will be boring and boring. Chen Cheng was waiting for Lin Jin to make a fool of himself. If Lin Jin's lecture didn't make sense, he would immediately question Lin Jin and embarrass him. After Chen Cheng said that, a few people immediately chimed in. That's right. If his lecture doesn't make sense, we won't listen to it anymore. Let's go. Yang Jie glanced at Chen Cheng. Chen Cheng's attitude towards Lin Jin was in line with his interests. Yang Jie had wanted to question Lin Jin as well. According to Lin Jin, cultivation methods that could aid in basic cultivation and increase one's realm were all secret techniques that could only be obtained by chance. They could only be learned with the guidance of a famous teacher. They were priceless treasures. Yang Jie had lectured dozens of times in the past. To be honest, all he talked about were minor techniques and his understanding of cultivation. Of course, he had never talked about the real stuff. It wasn't that Yang Jie didn't have it, but he couldn't possibly talk about it. Hence, when he heard that Lin Jin wanted to talk about the real stuff, Yang Jie's first reaction was discomfort. If Lin Jin talked about the real stuff, where would he be? Wouldn't that mean that he, Yang Jie, had been doing it half-heartedly? Yang Jie already disliked Lin Jin to begin with. Now, his disgust grew. Moreover, he didn't believe that Lin Jin would talk about it. At that moment, Lin Jin had already begun. The visualization method begins with enlightenment. In the beginning, observe first, think later. Then, think first, observe later. Lin Jin was talking about the Museum of Deadly Beasts summary of the visualization method. Lin Jin had never seen the Friar Association's Spirit Library before, so he didn't know that what he was talking about now was on a completely different level compared to the one in the Spirit Library. The visualization method in the Spirit Library was incomplete, and what he was talking about was the orthodox cultivation method of the ancient path of immortals. Anyone with the slightest bit of knowledge would be able to tell the difference between good and bad. Below the stage, the eyes of an assistant teacher who came to listen in lit up at this moment. His sleepy eyes immediately became sharp. This mantra. Amazing. Interesting. The assistant lecturer quickly searched for a pen and paper, wanting to jot it down. However, he realized that he had a habit of not bringing a pen and paper when he came to listen in. Left with no choice, he could only focus on listening. Of course, not everyone could tell the difference between good and bad. Many disciples either weren't paying attention or couldn't understand the value behind it. There were also some disciples who were diligent and had proper attitude. No matter who was lecturing, they would listen attentively and jot down the content. Xue Bauer was one of them. Especially since she admired and respected Lin Jin to begin with, she was the one who listened most attentively. Chen Qing was dumbfounded. What is he talking about? As he had read the Spirit Library's visualization method, he assumed that Lin Jin was talking about the same book. But once he started, he was dumbfounded. It wasn't the same thing at all. By the time Chen Qing snapped out of it, Lin Jin was already halfway through. Only then did Chen Qing realize how extraordinary this mantra was. Being able to rank fourth among the disciples meant that he was quite capable. After pondering it for a while, his heart skipped a beat. Without realizing it, he began to immerse himself in it and even started visualizing according to the mantra. As for what he said earlier about how he wasn't interested in this visualization method, he tossed that thought to the back of his mind. Not to mention Chen Chen, even Yang Jie was dumbfounded. Lin Jin's mantra was truly authentic. With Yang Jie's superb memory, he memorized the mantra and tried to understand it. Soon, he knew that this mantra could help him improve his cultivation. Suddenly, Yang Jie's expression turned odd. The introductory mantra of the visualization method wasn't anything valuable. To Lin Jin, the true value of this visualization method was something he didn't talk about. In the visualization method, external imagery was the basic mantra. The true core was the inner mind. That was the crux. Of course, Lin Jin wouldn't reveal the crux in a public lecture like this. Even if it was external imagery, Lin Jin would only recite the first part of the mantra. He wouldn't talk about the remaining 5 parts. Lin Jin finished the introductory mantra with 32 mantras. Right after that, he started on the first part of external imagery. There were a total of 56 mantras. The sun, moon, stars, mountains, rivers, lakes, seas, plants, birds, and beasts can all be visualized. By now, the crowd was dead silent. Everyone was listening attentively while more people began to record the mantra. After all, not everyone could enter a meditative state and follow Lin Jin's mantra. Memorizing it and slowly studying it when they got back was the safest way to go. Lin Jin recited slowly, his voice loud and clear. However, the mantra wasn't long to begin with, so it didn't take long for him to finish reciting. The crowd was silent. No one made a sound. Lin Jin looked at the crowd again. They were either meditating with their eyes closed or with their heads lowered. Lin Jin smiled and turned to Chen Qing. The latter had his eyes closed and was engrossed in his meditation. He was even mumbling something under his breath. If one listened closely, they could tell that he was reciting the mantra Lin Jin had just taught him. "Chunching, how was my lecture?" Lin Jin asked, interrupting the man's cultivation. Chuncheng's public provocation clearly didn't bear good intentions, so Lin Jin wasn't going to hold back. Chuncheng was in the middle of a crucial point in his meditation when Lin Jin interrupted him, causing him to forget a few mantras. He couldn't help but feel annoyed. But when he came back to his senses, he realized that many people were looking at him. Chuncheng's face reddened. He had just said that he wasn't interested in or looking forward to Lin Jin's lecture at all. Yet, he suddenly immersed himself in cultivation. This slap to the face was so embarrassing that even he felt embarrassed. Lin Jin had no intention of letting him off the hook. "Chun, speak. Don't you think what I've said is boring?" Lin Jin's expression darkened. When Chun and the others made things difficult for him earlier, he didn't act up because the time wasn't right. Now that he was going to recite the mantra, it was the perfect time to retaliate. Chapter 170. This. No matter how thick-skinned Chun was, he couldn't lie through his teeth. Lin Jin was telling the truth. If he were to say that Lin Jin was just brushing him off, he might incur the wrath of the crowd. Lin Jin suddenly said, "The incantation earlier is the cultivation formula for external imagery in the visualization technique. There are 56 sentences in total and I will explain them one by one later. But before that," after a pause, Lin Jin pointed at Chun and the disciples who were leading the group. "You guys have been stirring up trouble since the beginning. If you don't like it, you don't have to listen. Get out and don't disturb the others." He was actually chasing them away. Chun and the others were stunned. They had been the most aggressive earlier because they knew Lin Jin wouldn't be able to explain anything, so they were fearless. They had wanted to use this opportunity to humiliate Lin Jin and embarrass him in front of everyone, who knew that not only would Lin Jin be able to explain it, but he was also able to explain it to them. Truth be told, even Yi Yuzhou might not know the incantation earlier. After listening to it, Chun knew that the 56 sentences were indeed useful. How could he be willing to leave now? Wouldn't he be at a disadvantage if he left? Chun definitely wouldn't leave now. He didn't dare to reply, so he kept quiet, trying to act shamelessly. The other disciples who had been causing trouble earlier also acted the same, pretending to be ignorant. Lin Jin smirked. "How straightforward. Since you guys aren't leaving, I won't talk about it anymore. I have the incantation anyway. You guys can go and study it yourselves." Lin Jin decided to walk away. At this, the others were indignant. "Senior Lin, you mustn't. The incantation is hard to understand. The explanation is the key. Senior Lin, I beg of you, don't leave." Chun's provocation earlier had caused the other disciples to object. After all, it wasn't proper etiquette. Although it was a disciples' lecture, they still had to respect the host. In the past, when Yang Jie was lecturing, Chun had never raised any objections. Even an idiot could tell that Chun and the others were doing it on purpose. Of course, if Lin Jin couldn't explain anything, no one would stand up for him. But it was different now. There were 56 lines of the incantation, and those who could truly comprehend its meaning were few and far between. Most of them were only able to get a glimpse of its meaning. Now that they were in high spirits, if they didn't release the incantation now, it would be like scratching an itch through their clothes. Who could bear it? But now, no one dared to disrespect Lin Jin anymore. Forget the disciples, even the assistant lecturers here dared not offend Lin Jin. They too wanted to hear the explanation of external imagery. So, just like the other disciples, they all turned to look at Chun and the others. This time, Chun and the others finally understood what it meant to be like sitting on pins and needles. Being stared at by so many pairs of eyes made him feel uncomfortable all over. Chun clenched his fists, cursing Lin Jin inwardly. At the same time he thought, I'm not leaving. What can you do to me? He could hold on, but his lackeys couldn't. After all, there were many disciples with higher cultivation than them. They all glared at them. Who could stand it? Now, these people all felt like they were sitting on a brazier. They all looked at Chen Chen. Seeing how shameless Chen Chen was, one of them couldn't help but say, Senior Chen, please do us a favor. This was considered a polite way of putting it. A hot-tempered disciple who couldn't stand Chen Chen's behavior yelled, Hurry up and leave. I've been annoyed by you guys for a while now. No matter who's giving the incantation, they're just sharing their cultivation insight. Chen Chen, Senior Lin hasn't even started and you're already being picky. If you don't want to listen, hurry up and leave. Yeah, let's go. Hurry up and leave. Hurry up and leave. With someone taking the lead, the others began to shout at Chen Chen. This time, no matter how thick-skinned Chen Chen was, he couldn't stand it. Blushing, he got up and left. When the others saw this, they followed suit and ran away amidst the roars of laughter. Once outside, Chen Chen was on the verge of tears. When had he ever suffered such humiliation and grievance? To think that he was chased out by the crowd. Lin Jin, Chen Chen, will never forgive you. Chen Chen cursed. But soon after, he sneered, Lin Jin, you've sacrificed so much to share the secret technique, but you have no idea that you've offended Yang Jie. Unless you don't participate in the disciples' tournament, once you do, Yang Jie will make sure you suffer. Inside the lecture hall, Yang Jie's expression was dark. This Lin Jin is really sharing the secret technique. He's doing this on purpose to embarrass me. It was normal for Yang Jie to think this way. In the past, he had lectured dozens of times, but he had never touched on actual cultivation technique. He had only given detailed explanations of spells and cultivation experiences. In comparison, Lin Jin's lecture today was 10 times better than Yang Jie's. Yang Jie was a prideful person, so to Yang Jie, this was a blatant slap to his face. He couldn't take it anymore. Yang Jie got up and strode out. What infuriated him even more was that no one noticed him. Most of the disciples in the hall had their attention on Lin Jin. Yang Jie quickened his pace and walked out. Interpretation was to explain the mnemonic chant sentence by sentence. Some mnemonic chants could be understood by 10 people. Some were wrong, some were right, and there was more than one correct understanding. Just like the path up a mountain, some were tortuous and difficult to traverse while others were quick and easy. A good interpretation could greatly improve one's cultivation. For those with poor comprehension skills, they were more than willing to take advantage of this ready-made opportunity. Some of the disciples who had already comprehended the mantras were more than willing to listen and compare to see if there were any differences. This included some of the assistant lecturers. They were all on the 5th realm of their blood contract. Be it in terms of experience or ability, they far surpassed the disciples. They had already understood the 56 mantras that Lin Jin was going to share and had their own interpretations. As for Lin Jin's interpretation, they weren't really looking forward to it. This Lin Jin might have had a fortuitous encounter or learned about these 56 mantras from a great cultivator. If that's the case, his own interpretation might not be better than ours. When that happens, we can give him some pointers as a way of returning the favor, one of the assistant lecturers mused. Many others shared the same thought. Of course, there were also those who speculated that Lin Jin's interpretation might have been taught by a great cultivator. The crowd fell silent. Only Lin Jin's voice could be heard echoing throughout the hall. Word by word, Lin Jin's explanation was comprehensive. After listening carefully, while the crowd was shocked, they were also certain of one thing. Lin Jin's mantra, including his interpretation, must have been taught by a great cultivator. Otherwise, a disciple couldn't possibly have such an understanding. It was too detailed. And his understanding was profound. Listening to Lin Jin's interpretation was like listening to a great cultivator's lecture. After the explanation, Lin Jin's speech ended. However, it was still early, so he didn't get off the stage immediately. Instead, he said, "If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me." What a bold claim. The teaching assistants present were all taken aback. After all, it wasn't difficult to just recite the mantras. What was difficult was answering questions. Without a certain level of knowledge, one couldn't do that. Once they asked, they would be exposed. At this, the assistant lecturers were puzzled. Lin Jin could memorize the mantra and interpretation, but answering questions on the spot wasn't something that could be done with just a good memory. To do so, one must have a deep understanding of spells, and one must be knowledgeable as well. Just as Lin Jin said that, everyone raised their hands. Among them, Xue Baoer's hand was raised the highest. She was almost standing up as she waved incessantly, hoping to catch Lin Jin's attention. She was too obvious. It was hard not to notice. Lin Jin smiled. "Xue Baoer, go ahead." Xue Baoer's eyes curved into crescent moons. Perhaps Lin Jin was the first to get her to ask a question. She immediately got up and said, Senior Lin, you mentioned that the sun, moon, and stars can be visualized, and so can flowers, birds, fish, and insects. What's the difference between them? Is the sun and moon visualization stronger than the fish and insects? If that's the case, why is there a need to visualize flowers, birds, fish, and insects? Needless to say, Xue Baoer's way of thinking was different from the average person. The things she cared about were also different from the others. However, Lin Jin had something to say about this. The Museum of Deadly Beasts had a detailed description of cultivation method. Although there were no specific answers, Lin Jin only needed to draw inferences to answer Xue Baoer's questions. Xue Baoer, you mustn't rigidly adhere to what the incantation says. You must know that all things in the world can be visualized, and it doesn't matter if they are high or low, it only depends on whether they are suitable or not. In addition, the external imagery method only requires one object to be visualized. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Lin Jin answered. Xue Baoer raised her hand again. Senior brother Lin, what do you think? How do we know if they are suitable or not? Just like me, if I want to visualize, what should I choose? Lin Jin smiled. He couldn't say much about others, but he had already divined Xue Baoer. Visualizing external objects nourishes the mind and spirit, and the elements complement each other. You have a lively nature, so if you want to visualize, you need to calm your mind. Moreover, your element is fire, so you should visualize incense burners or plants. Xue Baoer came to a sudden realization. Without asking any more questions, she sat down and immediately closed her eyes to visualize. Soon, a disciple raised his hand. Lin Jin nodded at him, and the disciple immediately stood up and said, Senior brother Lin, I've studied visualization in the past, and I thought I was quite proficient in it. But after listening to your lecture today, I've realized that I've been a frog in a well. I've already visualized an object using the previous method, so if I want to change it now, it'll be as difficult as ascending to heaven. Do you have any suggestions for me, Senior brother Lin? This was a difficult question. Many people turned to Lin Jin, waiting to see how he would answer this question. The assistant lecturers did the same because even they didn't know how to answer this question. It was like a person who had gone down the wrong path and wanted to set things right. This was definitely more difficult than teaching a newbie. No matter how good a painter was, they would still like to paint on a blank piece of paper and not modify a failed painting. This was the same principle. Lin Jin pondered over this question for a moment before asking, What are you visualizing? The statue of Shin Budo. The disciple answered. The statue of Shin Budo was one of the ancient immortals. There were records of it in some ancient texts, and generations of painters followed the descriptions in the ancient texts to replicate the statue. Chapter 171. Over the years, many people had been practicing the visualization method, and there were many who chose the Shin Budo divine idol for the visualization of the external image. After all, the incomplete visualization manual in the Spirit Library had introduced how to visualize the Shin Budo statue. If one was skilled in visualization, they would be able to focus their mind and purify their mind to stabilize their psyche, preventing them from being attacked by bewitching illusions. Originally, it was good to visualize the Shin Wu Dao idol, but the problem was that the Shin Wu Dao idol's realm was too high. There was a saying that went, "The heart is higher than the sky, life is thinner than paper. How much strength you have, how much land you plow. You were only average to begin with, but you chose to visualize the Shin Budo statue. This was overestimating yourself." Hence, there were only a handful of people who could successfully visualize it. Most of them could only see the surface of the statue's shadow or expend too much of their psyche. The loss outweighed the gain. If it were Lin Jin, he wouldn't try to visualize the Shin Budo statue either. "How far have you progressed?" Lin Jin asked. "Virtual God Realm." The disciple looked embarrassed. The visualization realm was divided into 4 major realms: meditation, mental tranquility, ethereal echo, and transcendence. Relatively speaking, the first 2 realms were the easiest to reach. The virtual God the disciple mentioned was mental tranquility. If he could reach this realm, it meant that his comprehension and talent were impressive, especially when it came to visualizing the Shin Budo statue. It wasn't easy to reach this realm. But without a doubt, since he was visualizing the Shin Budo statue, reaching mental tranquility was his limit. He couldn't go any further. This was the disciple's problem. This was a path that was destined to be impossible. Since he had reached mental tranquility, it was impossible to break through his previous visualization and start all over again. It was indeed troublesome. However, there was a similar solution in the Museum of Deadly Beasts. After a moment of thought, Lin Jin asked, "Do you know what the Shin Budo statue wields?" The knowledgeable disciple nodded. "I do. The Shin Budo statue has 4 immortal weapons. They are the martial sacred lotus, the purple firmament dust in his left hand, the true martial demon slayer in his right, and the 9-colored light behind his head." Suddenly Lin Jin said, "Your attribute is wood, but you seem to be rootless. Don't visualize the statue of Shin Budo. Just visualize the sacred lotus will do. This will stabilize your foundation and calm your mind." The disciple thought about it carefully and seemed to have understood something. After thanking him, he sat down in satisfaction. Following that, more disciples raised questions and Lin Jin tried his best to answer them. Relying on the museum's detailed explanation of visualization, he was able to satisfy them. It must be known that it was not easy to achieve this. The lecture was nearing its end. Every disciple present felt that their trip had been worthwhile, and their respect for Lin Jin deepened. Lin Jin walked down the podium. He was quite relaxed. After all, he had the Museum of Deadly Beasts to back him up. There were many detailed explanations of spells inside. All he had to do was to memorize all the detailed explanations and find the corresponding or similar explanations when the time came. Come to think of it, Lin Jin felt that just cultivating visualization was enough. After all, it was an ancient immortal spell. Its main function was to stabilize the mind, expand the spirit ocean, and strengthen the spell's power. There shouldn't be anyone who could ascend to immortality through visualization alone. Lin Jin didn't plan to cultivate it too deeply either. After all, the Museum of Deadly Beasts had many other skills that were more powerful than visualization. "Lin Jin, please wait." Just then, a person came over. Judging by the 5 blood cloud patterns on his body, he must be an assistant lecturer of the Friar Association. The man approached Lin Jin and said with a smile, "Lin Jin, I'm the Spirit Library's steward. After hearing you talk about visualization today, I was suddenly enlightened. My horizons have been broadened." After a brief introduction, Lin Jin learned that this kind-looking assistant lecturer's name was Wu Shi. He was one of the stewards of the Spirit Library and was in charge of the compilation and management of books. Lin Jin, I'm sure that the external visualization you talked about earlier has no records of it in the Spirit Library. May I know where you learned it from? Wu Shi was a straightforward person. After exchanging a few pleasantries, he went straight to the point. Lin Jin could tell that he meant no harm. He simply wanted to clarify things. Lin Jin already had a rough idea of how the cultivation method came to be. I was taught by an expert. However, this expert doesn't care about fame and fortune, so if Steward Wu wishes to know who that expert is, forgive me for not being able to tell you, Lin Jin said, giving Wu Shi a heads up. Wu Shi wore a look of pity. He probably wanted to clarify things. Noticing the other man's hesitation, Lin Jin smiled and said, Steward Wu, please feel free to speak your mind. Wu Shi rubbed his hands together. Lin Jin was no ordinary disciple. Who in the Friar Association didn't know about him? He was a rank 2 beast appraiser recommended by Huang Fu-ming. Other than that, he got into a conflict with Yang Jie as soon as he arrived. His initial assessment was at the 4th realm of his blood contract. Now that he was giving a public lecture, his external visualization was even more amazing. Truth be told, although Wu Shi was at the 5th realm of his blood contract and was an assistant lecturer, he had to humble himself in front of Lin Jin. It's like this. Lin Jin, I'd like to record the external visualization that you're talking about in the Spirit Library. However, I'll have to seek your opinion on this first. After saying that, Wu Shi thought for a moment before continuing. If such an amazing technique could be popularized, it would be a blessing for all cultivators. I know it's rude of me to say this, but I, Wu Shi, have absolutely no selfish motives in this matter. Heaven and earth can bear witness. Having said that, Wu Shi bowed at Lin Jin with a sincere attitude. To Lin Jin, this external visualization technique was really nothing. He couldn't be bothered to cultivate it himself. After all, the true wonder of visualization lay in the internal visualization technique. However, if Lin Jin were to donate a cultivation method without any benefits, that wouldn't be appropriate either. Lin Jin was straightforward. He asked with a smile, "What benefits?" Wu Shi looked embarrassed. "Well, you'll have to sign your name on the compiled cultivation method. Also, the association will award you the title of an honorary disciple. I know that compared to the external visualization technique, these aren't even worth mentioning." Before Wu Shi could finish, Lin Jin nodded and said, "I agree." "Lin Jin, don't reject it just yet. You agree?" Wu Shi didn't know how to react as he stared at Lin Jin with wide eyes. Lin Jin gave him a firm answer. "I agree. Sign my name and the title of an honorary disciple." Lin Jin had no reason to reject this. After all, he had already publicly lectured on the external visualization technique and everyone present had memorized it. So, even if the cultivation method wasn't included in the Spirit Library, it would still be disseminated. Now that he could sign his name in a book and receive an honorary title, why not? It was a great honor to have one's signature recorded in the Spirit Library. Wu Shi told Lin Jin that Lin Jin was the first person to have a cultivation method recorded in the Spirit Library as a disciple. However, this wasn't something that Wu Shi could decide alone. In order to record certain cultivation methods and spells into the Spirit Library, all the mentors of the Friar Association had to give their approval. Wu Shi began running back and forth to handle this matter. What Lin Jin needed to do was to compile the formula for external visualization and the corresponding interpretation into a book. This wasn't difficult as Lin Jin could write it out on the spot. Wu Shi fetched a pen and paper for Lin Jin to write. In fact, he was just copying the contents of the Museum of Deadly Beasts. In less than half an hour, he had written a small volume with less than 20 pages. These were the essentials. He had discarded some unnecessary words and simplified the language. After he was done, he let Wu Shi take a look and the latter was impressed. This is truly a wonderful method. Although the formula is profound, with an interpretation, the threshold is much lower. I'll go look for the Spirit Library's manager now. Having said that, Wu Shi took Lin Jin's manuscript and hurried away. It was obvious that he was an impatient person. Lin Jin made a trip back home. He planned to help the Shadow Wolf evolve. Lin Jin was usually very busy. Xiaohua was always by his side and Goldie wasn't home most of the time. Hence, the house needed a pet beast to watch over the place. The deer hadn't fully recovered, and even if it did, it would probably return to Shi Wenjun's side. Hence, Lin Jin could only pin his hopes on the Shadow Wolf. Moreover, the Shadow Wolf had a calm temperament, so it was suitable for this task. Lin Jin had refined the 6 Shadow Beast Soul Pill at the Shi Manor yesterday. This was the key to the Shadow Wolf's perfect evolution. After having Xiaohua and Goldie guard outside, Lin Jin brought the Shadow Wolf into the house. Although Lin Jin and the Shadow Wolf didn't have a blood contract, the Shadow Wolf's loyalty toward Lin Jin was no less than that of a pet beast with a blood contract. In fact, it might even surpass the latter. Unlike the last time, Lin Jin had more tricks up his sleeves this time. His pulse-seeking technique had reached an extremely high level. Needles flew out and pierced into the Shadow Wolf's acupoints. Then, he fed the wolf the 6 Shadow Beast Soul Pill. Next, Lin Jin only needed to use the acupuncture technique and the pill's power to help the Shadow Wolf evolve perfectly. To the Shadow Wolf, this process was excruciating. Not only did it have to endure the pill's power rampaging through its body, but it also had to endure the pain of the needles piercing its acupoints. Yet, the Shadow Wolf didn't make a sound and simply endured the pain. Moments later, the pill's power filled the Shadow Wolf's body. The quality of the pill Lin Jin had refined this time was much higher than the 6 Sun Beast Soul Pill he gave Xiaohua. The strength of the pill was also several times stronger. The Shadow Wolf's skin and flesh were rupturing from the overpowering effects of the pill. Blood was seeping out of its fur. At this, Lin Jin knew things weren't looking good. Although the Shadow Wolf had recovered after Lin Jin's recuperation, it was still heavily injured. In addition to the overpowering effects of the pill, the Shadow Wolf couldn't hold on much longer. Lin Jin quickly flicked a needle into the Shadow Wolf's blood vessels to stabilize its internal organs. As time passed, the effects of the pill finally fused and a miraculous scene happened. The Shadow Wolf turned into a cloud of black mist and dispersed. Even Lin Jin was startled by this scene. The needles he had inserted into the Shadow Wolf's body had all fallen to the ground. Looking around, there was only black mist and the Shadow Wolf was nowhere to be seen. It was gone. If it was anyone else, they would definitely be at a loss. However, Lin Feng had long since understood all the attributes and hidden bloodline of the Shadow Wolf. At this moment, he could conclude that his perfect state this time had activated the hidden bloodline of the Shadow Wolf. Nether. Chapter 172. Undead. This was a bloodline that couldn't be found in most beast appraisal books. It was extremely rare. And rare meant that only a few people knew about it. Lin Jin only found out about the mystery of the undead bloodline through the Museum of Deadly Beasts. Once the bloodline was activated, one could use the bloodline's abilities. In other words, it could transform into a black fog and even become invisible. Knowing this, Lin Jin remained calm. He watched as the black fog around him began to surge and slowly converge. First, it took the shape of a wolf's claws, then 4 limbs, a torso, and finally a wolf's head. The Shadow Wolf that appeared once again was clearly much larger. However, it was not as large as Xiaohua's. Instead, it was more slender, and the Shadow Wolf's claws were even sharper. Each of them seemed to be forged from steel, and the claws were longer, like the sharp blades of short swords. In terms of aura, the Shadow Wolf was much stronger than before. Even standing before it, Lin Jin felt a sense of danger. Its black fur swayed and the black fog around it seemed like it could hide in the darkness at any time. This was the most suitable beast to roam in the dark. Even if there was no darkness, it could create darkness. Just like how the house was now filled with black fog. The Shadow Wolf was curious about the changes after the bloodline was activated. After getting Lin Jin's permission, it took a step back and hid in the black fog. The next moment, the Shadow Wolf leaped out from the black fog behind Lin Jin. Its movements were extremely light and fast, almost without any sound. It was as if it was in the darkness, silent, yet extremely dangerous, able to instill fear in others. Lin Jin waved and the Shadow Wolf came over in a flash, like a grim reaper wandering in the darkness. However, before Lin Jin, it was still the same Shadow Wolf that Lin Jin brought back. Lin Jin extended his hand and the wolf moved its head closer, allowing Lin Jin to pet it. This time, the information in the Museum of Deadly Beasts changed. Rank 3 Nether Wolf. Undead bloodline activated. Dark attribute. There are two types of advancement methods, which can cultivate the beast energy formation. Just as Lin Jin expected, the Shadow Wolf was the same as Xiaohua. After a perfect evolution, it was at least 10 times stronger than before. If the Shadow Wolf were to fight Xiaohua now, it would be hard to say who would win. Lin Jin looked at the next evolution method. Relatively speaking, the materials required for the Umber Wolf were more precious. Of course, its strength would also increase after advancing. While Lin Jin was helping the Shadow Wolf evolve, Lin Jin's public lecture caused quite a commotion in the Friar Association. After all, there were many people in the Friar Association and not everyone attended the lectures. Have you heard? Lin Jin will be the one giving the lecture this morning. Lin Jin. The one who had a conflict with senior brother Yang Jie? That's him. To be honest, I'm not optimistic about him. He can't be compared to senior brother Yang Jie. What did he say? It's a branch of visualization, the external image method. Do you have notes? I borrowed one. Let's take a look. Those who were originally disdainful were immediately shocked when they saw the lecture note. Even a stupid person would be able to see the wonders of this external image technique. And this was because the person who took down the notebook didn't write everything down. I didn't expect there to be an external image method in visualization. I didn't expect it to be this amazing. I know, right? I'm regretting it so much. I should have attended the lecture this time. It's not your fault. Senior brother Yang Jie has always been the one giving lectures. But to be honest, senior brother Yang Jie's lectures don't have any real substance, so we couldn't be bothered to go. Who knew that Lin Jin would be the one giving the lecture this time? Among the disciples, the lecture notes had become something they couldn't get their hands on. Meanwhile, in the circle of teaching assistants and instructors, this external imagery method had also caused a commotion. Moreover, it was different from the disciple level. At the teacher level, one could truly see how extraordinary the external imagery technique was. Luo Beihe was now carefully reading through Shui Baoer's lecture note. She went through them carefully, and when she was done, her expression was fascinating. Last time, I was still doubting the authenticity of Lin Jin's fire spirit possession guidance. Now, it seems like he's truly talented and he must have been taught by an expert. It's no wonder he's unwilling to learn from a master. This was Luo Beihe's judgment. She just couldn't figure out who the expert was who taught Lin Jin was. However, Luo Beihe deduced from the external imagery method that the other party was definitely an extremely knowledgeable elder. This could be deduced from the notes that Shui Baoer had brought back regarding the interpretation of the mnemonic chant. Forget Shui Baoer, even Luo Beihe herself was impressed by the incantation. Without a certain level of foundation, one couldn't possibly write something like this. Just then, a disciple came in to report that the Spirit Library's manager had summoned the mentors for a discussion. Luo Beihe could guess what it was, so she didn't delay and headed straight for the Spirit Library. When she arrived, she noticed that several mentors had already arrived. Mr. E was already seated and drinking tea, chatting happily with the mentors he was familiar with. It was a relaxing atmosphere. At the sight of Luobeha, Mr. E quickly got up to welcome her. The other mentors did the same. This was mainly because Luobeha was one of the few female mentors in the Friar Association, and she was very pretty. "Mr. Beha, come, have a seat here." Mr. E was very enthusiastic as he beckoned Luobeha over. The mentors often discussed cultivation, so now that they were sitting together, the topic of conversation naturally revolved around this topic. "I heard that the Spirit Library's manager is going to record a new cultivation method, and according to tradition, he's going to ask for our opinions. I heard that the cultivation method they're going to record this time isn't simple. We've known about this for a long time. Isn't it just an external image method's incantation and its corresponding incantation? I've read a few of the disciples' notes, and while that cultivation method is unique, its level is too low, so it can only be used to expand one's spirit energy. It's not that valuable," an arrogant mentor suddenly said. His tone was obviously sour. Luobeha frowned. She held the external image method in high esteem, so it was only natural that she wasn't happy to hear that. "Mr. Gu, you're wrong. I've also read my disciples' notes about this external image method. Not only can it increase one's spirit energy and expand one's spirit meridians, but most importantly, it can help one to focus one's mind. Regardless of the level of cultivation, cultivators like us will often encounter moments of restlessness during cultivation. Sometimes it's due to a lack of concentration, too many thoughts, or even inner demons during cultivation. These are the biggest obstacles on the path of cultivation. However, once you've grasped the basics of this external image method, you can at least stabilize your spirit force. That way, you'll be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort." After a pause, Luobeha continued, "Even though I've studied it a little, I feel that it's very useful. At the very least, my spirit force is much more stable than before and my spirit energy has increased by 3 stones. That mentor with the surname Go immediately lost face and was put on the spot. However, his reputation was slightly lower than Luobeha's, so he didn't dare to go against her. Furthermore, if he really did, he would definitely be targeted by everyone present, especially Mr. E. Hence, he decided to endure it for now. "Mr. Huang Fu is here." Just then, someone announced. Everyone stood up to welcome him. In Maple City's Friar Association, Huang Fu Ming was a master teacher with an extremely high status. His cultivation level was also one realm higher than everyone else's, and he was so knowledgeable that even Yi Yuzhou had to admit his inferiority sometimes. Hence, when Huang Fu Ming entered, everyone rushed to greet him. Not long after Huang Fu Ming arrived, another person walked in from outside. "Mr. Yuzhou." Everyone stood up and bowed again. This time, it was Yi Yuzhou, the #1 person in Maple City's Friar Association. Not just in Maple City but even in the entire Jade Dragon Kingdom, Yi Yuzhou was one of the top cultivators. Whether it was his cultivation level or his pet beast's rank, Yi Yuzhou walked in with a smile and immediately saw Huang Fu Ming. He was stunned. "Brother Huang Fu, you've reached the 8th realm of your blood contract?" Everyone was astonished. In the past, Yi Yuzhou was the only one in Maple City's Friar Association who was at the 8th realm while Huang Fu Ming was at the 7th realm. Based on what Yi Yuzhou said, Huang Fu Ming's cultivation level had improved. Huang Fu Ming smiled. "Brother Yuzhou, you're really observant. I've just reached the 8th realm too." This was a solid piece of news. Everyone quickly congratulated him. Blood contract 8th realm was still a long way off for them. Most of them might never reach that realm in their entire lives. Yi Yuzhou took his seat as well. Everyone could tell that Yi Yuzhou was in a good mood, but they wondered what good news he had encountered. At this moment, the manager of the Spirit Library stood up and cupped his hands towards the crowd. Everyone, I have invited all of you here today to collect a cultivation technique mnemonic chant into the Spirit Library. According to the rules, all the mentors have to give their approval first. This manager was the old man who usually sat at the Spirit Library's entrance. In terms of experience, he was second only to Yi Yuzhou and Huang Fu-ming. Having said that, he took out a booklet and passed it around for everyone to read. This is the visualization technique's external imagery. There's a total of 56 sentences and an explanation of over 5,000 words. The author is a disciple of our association, Lin Jin. I've read through the entire cultivation method and the incantation is complete. It should be the orthodox incantation of the ancient visualization technique. As for the explanation, it's even more detailed and profound. I love reading, so even if I were to live for another few decades, I wouldn't be able to come up with such an explanation. The Spirit Library's manager's evaluation was undoubtedly high. As everyone flipped through it, they nodded in agreement. Luo Beihe took a look and asked, "Is this Lin Jin's handwriting?" "That's right." The Spirit Library's manager nodded. "Nice handwriting," Luo Beihe praised. When it reached Yi Yuzhou and Huang Fu-ming's hands, the two of them flipped through it and their expressions changed. One of them frowned while the other's expression darkened. At this moment, Huang Fu-ming said, "I once traveled the world and searched for the cave ruins of some ancient cultivators. As for the visualization technique, I've studied it before. The entire visualization technique is divided into the external imagery technique and the inner spirit technique. The external imagery technique does indeed have 56 verses, and I even know a third of them. Now that I've verified it, as far as I know, it's the real technique." Chapter 173. Authentic techniques were techniques that had been passed down from generation to generation. They weren't lost, and their descendants were able to find a way to complete them. Yi Yuzhou nodded as well. He agreed with Huang Fu-ming on this point. "But this interpretation doesn't seem to be the work of a young man," Huang Fu-ming said honestly. "The incantation had always existed, so if one was lucky enough to find it somewhere, it wouldn't be surprising. But interpretation was different. That was the understanding and realization of the incantation. Usually, it wouldn't be passed down to outsiders. Few techniques had been passed down in the world to begin with, and the corresponding interpretation was even rarer. Only later generations could comprehend and understand the incantation. In ancient times, immortal sects were overly particular about the concept of family status. Many cultivation techniques were kept under tight wraps, and only true disciples were allowed to pass them on. In this way, many of the ancient cultivation techniques were also lost. Just like how visualization, external imagery, and internal consciousness were lost. The ones that were passed down were either incomplete copies, or the incantations were completed by the later generations. Naturally, they weren't as good as authentic technique. In my opinion, there shouldn't be any obstacles for this external imagery to enter the Spirit Library. Huang Fu-ming's words seemed to have settled the matter. Yi Yuzhou frowned. With Huang Fu-ming's stance, even if the other mentors had different opinions, they wouldn't dare to say anything. The only one who could express his opinion was Yi Yuzhou himself. "Brother Huang Fu, this external imagery is indeed marvelous, but as you said, its origin is mysterious. I've heard of Lin Jin, a rank 2 beast appraiser. Logically speaking, he should have a high status and is knowledgeable. But to think that he could obtain this long-lost incantation with his own means is quite difficult. What's more, there's such a detailed interpretation. If we don't figure out the origin of this incantation and hastily include it in the Spirit Library with Lin Jin's name on it, I'm afraid we'll attract unnecessary trouble." Yi Yuzhou's worries weren't unreasonable. If Lin Jin obtained this cultivation technique through shady means and put it in the Spirit Library, no one would be able to explain themselves if someone came looking for them. Just then, the Spirit Library's manager said, I've had someone ask Lin Jin about the origins of this external imagery. Lin Jin said it was taught to him by an expert who didn't want to reveal his name. I don't think there'll be any problems. Hearing this, the mentors finally understood. As expected, Luo Beiha nodded slightly. The other mentors chimed in as well. I knew it. Lin Jin couldn't have come up with this interpretation on his own. Sure enough, he had an expert to guide him. Yi Yuzhou and Huang Fu-ming looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. There was no other reason. The expert Lin Jin mentioned must be someone extraordinary. The higher one's realm was, the more one would be able to read the depth of the explanation from the text. Because of this, there was also terror. Lin Jin didn't expect this. After all, his realm was still too low. He didn't know the consequences of copying the Museum of Deadly Beasts. As the saying goes, don't show off your wealth. And now, Lin Jin had accidentally revealed his wealth. Huang Fu-ming was fine, but Yi Yuzhou had some thoughts. His most valued disciple, Yang Jie, had once clashed with Lin Jin and even suffered a loss. Yi Yuzhou obviously wouldn't stoop so low as to target Lin Jin, but they definitely weren't on friendly terms. At the very least, they were competitors. Now that Lin Jin had signed his name on this external imagery, it was a great honor to be included in the Spirit Library, especially for a disciple. In terms of reputation, Yang Jie no longer had any advantage over Lin Jin. Yi Yuzhou was obviously unhappy that his own disciple was inferior to someone else. After all, Yang Jie represented Yi Yuzhou's face. Huang Fu-ming didn't care about this because this matter didn't involve him. With that in mind, Yi Yuzhou said, I think it's better to clarify the cultivation method's origin. After all, there's no proof. The group was stunned. Although Yi Yuzhou didn't say it out loud, his meaning was clear. He wanted to clarify the cultivation method's origin. In that case, let's call Lin Jin over and ask him about it. Since Yi Yuzhou had spoken, the Spirit Library's manager couldn't say anything else. After all, Yi Yuzhou's status was too high. Even if he didn't think it was necessary, he could only comply. Huang Fu-ming didn't say anything. It was understandable that Yi Yuzhou wanted to clarify the cultivation method's origin. Moreover, Huang Fu-ming was curious about this matter as well. He didn't have any ulterior motives. He just wanted to know who the expert behind Lin Jin was. Perhaps he could pay him a visit and learn from him if he had the chance. Hence, he didn't object. Since the two leaders of the Friar Association had expressed their stance, the others couldn't say anything else. Soon, an assistant lecturer was sent out to look for Lin Jin. Little did they know that Lin Jin was currently helping the Shadow Wolf evolve at home. After failing to find anything in the association, the assistant lecturer hurried to the Beast Appraisal Association only to find nothing. This made him sweat profusely. After finding out where Lin Jin lived, he immediately rushed over. When he finally arrived, he was stopped by Xiaohua. No matter how hard he tried, he wouldn't be able to get in. The black fog produced by the Shadow Wolf's evolution blocked out all sound, so the assistant lecturer couldn't get in. The assistant lecturer panicked. He planned to force his way in. After all, there were many official mentors waiting for him at the association. Also, he was confident that he was a capable man with a fifth realm blood contract and a rank 2 pet beast. But this decision brought him tragedy. Lin Jin's order to Xiaohua was simple. No one was to step into the yard and disturb his evolution of the Shadow Wolf. If it were Zhaoying, Lu Xiaoyun, or the others, seeing Xiaohua standing guard at the door, they would know that Lin Jin had something important to do, so they wouldn't force their way in. No one would come looking for him for no reason either. However, Lin Jin didn't expect the Friar Association to send someone after him. What's more, this assistant lecturer was an impatient one. The assistant lecturer barged into the yard with his pet beast, thinking that he could easily subdue Xiaohua before entering the house. But just as he entered the yard, Xiaohua launched an attack. The strength of a rank 3 pet beast was overwhelming. In the blink of an eye, the confident assistant lecturer was sent sprawling on the ground. He didn't even have time to cast a spell. If it weren't for his 5th realm blood contract and sturdy physique, he would have been half dead by now. Even so, the assistant lecturer couldn't get up after being slapped by Xiaohua. He lay moaning on the ground. As for his pet beast, it was pinned to the ground by Xiaohua, not daring to move a muscle. Just like a rabbit caught by a tiger, it could only tremble in fear. Fortunately, Xiaohua didn't continue attacking. Instead, he tossed the man and beast out of the yard. Lin Jin had specifically instructed him not to let Xiaohua harm anyone. The assistant lecturer, who was in a daze from the fall outside, crawled up from the ground. He looked battered and exhausted, but he didn't dare to force his way in. This time, he had truly lost all his face. Filled with anger, he returned to the Friar Association and exaggerated the entire situation. Yu Zhou and the others frowned upon hearing this. Lin Jin must be at home. His pet beast was there, so he must be there too. But why didn't he come out? Moreover, he allowed his pet beast to injure the association's assistant lecturer. This was no small matter. Moreover, it was only Lin Jin's pet beast, but it was enough to knock out the Friar Association's assistant lecturer with a 5th realm blood contract along with his pet beast. This was intriguing. That Lin Jin has crossed the line. No matter what, he shouldn't have allowed his pet beast to injure others. He's challenging the Friar Association's authority. The injured assistant lecturer added fuel to the fire. Suddenly, someone stood up and said, "Perhaps Lin Jin really has something urgent to attend to. How about this, I'll make a trip there." It was Huang Fu-ming. After careful consideration, Huang Fu-ming's presence couldn't be better. After all, he was the one who recommended Lin Jin into the Friar Association. If Lin Jin really disobeyed the association's orders and violated the rules, Huang Fu-ming should be the one to teach Lin Jin a lesson. "Then I'll have to trouble brother Huang Fu to make the trip," Yu Zhou said. It was obvious that Yu Zhou disliked Lin Jin greatly. It wasn't just because of Yang Jie, but also because Lin Jin had made them wait for so long and the assistant lecturer they sent was even injured by his pet beast. Based on Yu Zhou's temperament, no matter how talented a person like Lin Jin was, he had to be kicked out of the Friar Association. The only reason he hadn't acted up yet was because he wanted to see how Huang Fu-ming would handle this matter. Huang Fu-ming's cultivation level was extremely high. When he left, he cast a spell that allowed him to cover 100 feet in a single step. In just a few breaths, he was already outside Lin Jin's yard. Lin Jin had yet to come out. Noticing someone else, Xiaohua immediately went on alert. Huang Fu-ming was stunned to see Xiaohua. It wasn't his first time seeing Xiaohua. However, Xiaohua had been following Lin Jin around and had kept his aura hidden so he couldn't tell how powerful he was. But now, Xiaohua wasn't hiding his aura at all. Huang Fu-ming could tell Xiaohua's rank at a glance. No wonder. Huang Fu-ming mumbled to himself. That assistant lecturer must have barged in recklessly and ended up being attacked by Lin Jin's pet beast. However, Lin Jin seemed to have given the pet beast an order, so the assistant lecturer was only lightly injured. Forget an assistant lecturer, even an average mentor wouldn't be able to handle a rank 3 pet beast. As an official rank 2 beast appraiser, Lin Jin had a solid foundation in beast appraising, so it wasn't strange for him to have a rank 3 pet beast. Looking around the house, Huang Fu-ming's eyes lit up. At first glance, he couldn't tell anything, but upon closer inspection, he would notice a strange aura above the house. As knowledgeable as Huang Fu-ming was, he deduced that a pet beast was evolving. "I see." Huang Fu-ming figured out that Lin Jin must be helping a pet beast evolve inside the house and couldn't be disturbed. That was why he had his pet beast guard the door and forbid anyone from entering. That assistant lecturer didn't understand the situation and barged in recklessly. Naturally, he would be attacked. Huang Fu Ming didn't insist on summoning Lin Jin. He planned to head back first. Just then, Lin Jin pushed open the door and walked out. He immediately spotted Huang Fu Ming outside the yard. "Mr. Huang Fu." Lin Jin hurried over to greet him. Lin Jin had a lot of respect for this man. Huang Fu Ming stopped in his tracks and smiled at Lin Jin. Then, he noticed the shadow wolf behind Lin Jin. Just one look and Huang Fu Ming's heart skipped a beat. Another rank 3. Chapter 174. Even though Huang Fu Ming was experienced, knowledgeable, and composed, he couldn't help but gasp at this moment. Since when was it so easy for a rank 3 pet beast to evolve? In some small countries, rank 3 beasts were the guardian beasts of the country. Outside, a rank 3 beast was enough to establish a sizable force. From small aristocratic families to large and remote small countries, rank 3 pet beasts were existences that could hold their own. Even Huang Fu Ming's pet beast was only rank 3 at the moment. Although it was considered the best among rank 3 beasts, it was still a rank 3. No matter where one went, rank 3 beasts weren't common. In fact, they were rare. But here in Lin Jin's yard, there were 2 of them. Lin Jin had no idea what they were thinking. If he did, he would be glad that Huang Fu Ming didn't see Goldie. If Huang Fu Ming saw Goldie, he would probably have a mental breakdown. As expected of a famous teacher in the Friar Association, Huang Fu Ming calmed himself down and explained the situation at the Friar Association. When Lin Jin heard that an assistant lecturer came looking for him while he was helping the Shadow Wolf evolve, and that the man was even beaten up by Xiao Hua, he turned to look at Xiao Hua. The latter seemed to be wondering if he had done something wrong as he lowered his head in dejection. However, what Lin Jin did next cheered him up again. "Xiao Hua, good job," Lin Jin praised before patting the dog's head. Lin Jin clearly didn't think Xiao Hua had done anything wrong because he was the one who gave Xiao Hua the order. Forget an assistant lecturer, even if Huang Fu Ming came and was blocked outside, Lin Jin wouldn't blame Xiao Hua. However, he definitely had to go to the association to console that unlucky assistant lecturer. Xiao Hua must have taught him a lesson. "Lin Jin, if there's nothing else, come with me. The mentors in the association are still waiting for you," Huang Fu Ming suddenly said. He had already explained the situation to Lin Jin. The reason he called Lin Jin over was to ask about the origin of external imagery. Lin Jin had already spoken to the Spirit Library's manager, Wu Shi, about this. Who knew the association would still be so concerned about it? Lin Jin really couldn't tell them where the cultivation method came from. But if you push it too far, he would just refuse to give them the cultivation method. That should be fine, right? On the way, Huang Fu Ming said, "Mr. Yuzhou, the #1 mentor of the association, is also here. He's Yang Jie's mentor." It was a kind reminder. The conflict between Lin Jin and Yang Jie was now common knowledge thanks to some rumors. Even Huang Fu Ming had heard about it. Lin Jin's rise to power was already a threat to Yang Jie, so it was only natural for them to be at loggerheads, just like how Lu Yunhe and Yang Jie used to be. However, Lu Yunhe wasn't as strong as Yang Jie, so the conflict wasn't that serious. But now, Lin Jin was on par with Yang Jie in every aspect. In fact, he was even stronger in certain areas. As the saying went, 2 tigers can't live on the same mountain, so it wasn't strange for them to clash. He reminded Lin Jin so that he could prepare himself for Yi Yuzhou's harassment. Lin Jin thanked him with a smile. In any case, he had already made up his mind. If the association were to force him to reveal the origin of the technique, then he would just let them go. At most, he wouldn't enter the Spirit Library. When they arrived, Lin Jin immediately spotted Yi Yuzhou among the group of mentors. Because Lin Jin had met Yi Yuzhou before. "Isn't this old Yi?" Lin Jin was surprised. Old Yi was visitor number 10 in the Museum of Deadly Beasts Visitation Hall. They met the last time the visitation hall was opened. Lin Jin had a good impression of this old man, but he didn't expect him to be in Maple City as well. What's more, he was a mentor of the Friar Association. Right, his name was Yi Yujo, so he addressed himself as Old Yi. Lin Jin finally got the right name. What a coincidence! Who would have thought he would run into one of his visitation hall's visitors in the Friar Association? Yi Yujo currently had a stern look on his face. Unlike Huang Fu-ming's gentle and approachable demeanor, Yi Yujo was now putting on airs. "You're Lin Jin?" Yi Yujo suddenly asked. Lin Jin nodded and saluted. "Greetings, Mr. Yujo." Yi Yujo was already prejudiced against Lin Jin, so no matter how he looked at him, he found him an eyesore. However, with his status, Yi Yujo wouldn't make things difficult for Lin Jin in front of everyone. Instead, he said, "Putting aside the fact that your pet beast injured someone, all of us mentors have been waiting here for you for more than an hour because of your external visualization. This cultivation method, be it the incantation or the explanation, is impeccable and is worthy of being included in the spirit library. However, we must clarify the origins of this cultivation method. We've called you here to verify this with you." Regarding this, all Lin Jin could say was to continue the lie he had fabricated earlier. That was, he had received guidance from an expert. As for the name of that expert, Lin Jin couldn't reveal it. After all, there was no such person in the world. Initially, this matter could have been ignored. Other than Yi Yujo, no one else here pressed Lin Jin for an answer. However, Yi Yujo seemed to be very concerned about this matter. Whether he was being serious or doing it on purpose, Yi Yujo just wanted to ask Lin Jin about the identity of the expert who taught him this cultivation method. Lin Jin answered bluntly, "Mr. Yujo, no matter how many times you ask me, the answer will be the same. I can't tell you, I can't tell you." Yi Yujo's expression darkened. The atmosphere turned awkward. The mentors all had their own thoughts. Even Huang Fu-ming couldn't say anything. After all, Yi Yujo hadn't done anything wrong. It was just a matter of whether or not he trusted Lin Jin. If he trusted Lin Jin, he could ignore it. But if he didn't, he would assume that Lin Jin was lying and that this cultivation method had come from an improper source. It was that simple. "Lin Jin, if that's the case, then this cultivation method of yours can't be included in the spirit library." At this time, Yi Yujo brought out his greatest trump card, which was to exercise his veto power. However, he had clearly forgotten one thing. It wasn't Lin Jin who requested for the cultivation method to be included, but the spirit library. To Lin Jin, this didn't matter at all. Moreover, Lin Jin was displeased with Yi Yujo's attitude. He simply said, "Whatever you want. If there's nothing else, I'll be leaving." Having said that, he got up and left, leaving Yi Yujo hanging. This infuriated Yi Yujo to no end. Huang Fu-ming shook his head while the spirit library's manager sighed. "Then," he said, "the spirit library was the one who volunteered to include Lin Jin's cultivation method." Yi Yujo felt awkward. He had always assumed that Lin Jin was the one who volunteered to include the cultivation method in the spirit library. Putting Yi Yujo aside, after Lin Jin left the room, he grumbled, "Old Yi, just you wait." Lin Jin was clearly annoyed. Lin Jin was a vengeful person. He couldn't do anything to Yi Yujo now, but in the visitation hall, he had many tricks up his sleeve. If he remembered correctly, the visitation hall would reopen tomorrow. Lin Jin was already rubbing his palms together in anticipation. Yi Yujo still had no idea who he had offended. He had been humiliated this time. Initially, he didn't have to be so strict about this matter, and he usually turned a blind eye to it. But because of Yang Jie, Lin Jin didn't rush over immediately, and because of his preconceived notions, Yi Yujo had to act this way. In the end, he lost his composure and was humiliated. After returning, Yi Yujo took a big gulp of tea to calm himself down. Only then did he regain his composure. There's no need to get angry over such trivial matters. This is a grudge between the younger generations, so let them settle it among themselves. I should focus on studying the ascending cloud flood dragon's evolution method. Speaking of which, that curator is truly an expert among experts. The method he gave me is definitely feasible. However, I still ran into some trouble while helping my soaring cloud flood dragon evolve. But that's alright. The visitation hall will reopen tomorrow, so I'll just have to ask curator for guidance when I get there. At this thought, Yujo felt much happier. His initial displeasure vanished into thin air. Sigh, seriously. Why must I be so demanding of a junior? But it's not like I've done anything wrong. It's good to be stricter with the examination. If Lin Jin's cultivation method comes from an illegal source, the Friar Association will surely be implicated. Although I'll be losing a rare cultivation method, I'll be able to avoid some trouble. That's a good thing, Yujo mumbled to himself. Just then, Yang Jie came in to greet him. This was the time for him to teach Yang Jie in private. Yang Jie, you're here. Yujo was in a good mood. Yang Jie bowed respectfully and addressed him as his teacher. The disciple tournament will be held in a few days. How are your preparations going? Yujo asked. Yang Jie was brimming with confidence. Teacher, for the past few years, I've been number one among the disciples, and it's the same this year. No one can shake my position. Yujo was very satisfied with Yang Jie's answer. But as a teacher, he had to give him a few words of encouragement. Yang Jie, even if victory is in your grasp, you mustn't let your guard down. The rewards given by headquarters for this year's disciple tournament are excellent, especially that lesser dragon blood pill. It was obtained from an ancient immortal's cave by an expert from headquarters. If you can obtain it, and if I ask for an evolution method for your pet beast will definitely evolve into level 4. At Yujo's words, Yang Jie's excitement was palpable. After hearing Yujo's words, because Lin Jin had snatched his lecture today, the anger in Yang Jie's heart subsided. Once his pet beast evolved into level 4, it would become the Jade Dragon Kingdom's true combat power. By then, would Yang Jie still have to worry about his status? By then, all sorts of honors would be bestowed upon him. Someone like Lin Jin wouldn't even deserve to carry his shoes for him. Next, Yujo lectured Yang Jie on spells. But halfway through, a disciple outside informed him that there was a visitor. Yujo frowned. But he knew that if it wasn't an important guest, his disciple wouldn't disturb him at a time like this. Do you know who the visitor is? Yujo asked. The disciple quickly answered. That person said his surname is Lu and he's from the Jade Dragon Kingdom. At this, Yujo laughed out loud. It's an important guest. Yang Jie, come with me to welcome him. Chapter 175. Outside, Lu Bin, who had just arrived from Jade Dragon City, was admiring the scenery in Yujo's courtyard. Lu Bin was here to invite Lin Jin to Jade Dragon City as a guest. This was an order from the 6th princess, so he had to do a good job. Lu Bin was extremely grateful to Lin Jin. If it weren't for Lin Jin's 9-water floating cloud pill prescription, the 6th princess might not even be able to get out of bed. Lu Bin was eternally grateful for this favor. Unlike his previous emergency visit to Maple City, he had a lot more time this time. Lu Bin could also catch up with his old friend, Yujo, while he was at it. They were old acquaintances. Although Lu Bin was younger than Yujo in terms of age and cultivation level, Lu Bin came from an extraordinary background. Not only was his father, Lu Yaogong, once a top-notch expert in Jade Dragon Kingdom, he was also Yujo's mentor. Hence, based on this relationship, Yujo had to address Lu Bin as Senior Lu whenever he saw him. Moments later, Yujo hurried out. When he saw Lu Bin, he saluted him. Greetings, Senior Lu. Lu Bin smiled. I came to Maple City for business, so I thought I'd drop by to see you. Behind him, Yang Jie studied Lu Bin, musing that this man looked younger than his teacher, so why was his teacher treating him with such respect? Of course, Yang Jie was oblivious to their relationship. Yang Jie, come over here and greet him. Yi Yuzhou suddenly turned around and said. Yang Jie immediately went over and bowed respectfully. Lu Bin turned to look at Yang Jie and nodded. Good seedling. Yi Yuzhou smiled. This is my chief disciple, Yang Jie. Having said that, he turned to Yang Jie and said, This is Uncle Lu. Back then, he was, before he could finish, Lu Bin waved him off. Let's not talk about what happened back then. Yi Yuzhou didn't finish his sentence. Yang Jie was curious but he didn't dare to ask. Seeing that the two of them were about to catch up, it wasn't appropriate for him to stay, so he left. However, Yang Jie didn't leave either. He waited outside the door. After a long while, Yi Yuzhou escorted Lu Bin out. Yuzhou, don't bother. After I'm done with my business, I'll be returning to the royal capital, Lu Bin said. Yi Yuzhou nodded and said, I'll pay a visit to senior brother Lu in the future. Lu Bin nodded and then he left swiftly. After Lu Bin left, Yang Jie walked up to him. Teacher, this Uncle Lu is. He is the only son of my teacher, Lu Yaogong. In his early years, he was a general of the left. Now, he is one of the royal consecrators, Yi Yuzhou said. When Yang Jie heard this, his eyes lit up. There was no doubt that this Uncle Lu was a big tree. Yi Yuzhou enjoyed a high status in Maple City, where even the city lord manor had to treat him with respect. But in Jade Dragon City, he wouldn't be as influential as he was in Maple City. Yang Jie's ambition was higher than the heavens. He was certain that sooner or later, he would become a dragon that soared to the heavens. His stage in the future was no longer this tiny Maple City, but Jade Dragon City. If he could get on Lu Bin's good side, he would be more confident in Jade Dragon City in the future. Most importantly, he was the only son of Lu Yaogong. Who was Lu Yaogong? He was the strongest cultivator in Jade Dragon Kingdom 100 years ago. Back then, Jade Dragon Kingdom was a premium country and their only rank 5 pet beast belonged to Lu Yaogong. In other words, Lu Yaogong was the one who propped up Jade Dragon Kingdom 100 years ago. But after Lu Yaogong's unexpected death, Jade Dragon Kingdom was implicated and fell from being a premium country to an intermediate one. For decades, there were no more top-notch experts like Lu Yaogong. Because of this, the people of Jade Dragon Kingdom cherished the past and treated Lu Yaogong with the utmost respect. Based on this identity alone, one could see how influential Lu Bin was. At this moment, Yang Jie was desperate to climb up to this big tree, so he couldn't help asking, Teacher, then why did Uncle Lu come to Maple City? Yi Yuzhou shook his head. I've asked but Senior Lu didn't tell me. He only said that he's here for an important matter. Yi Yuzhou was just as curious. Little did they know that Lu Bin was here for an important matter. He wanted to invite Lin Jin to Jade Dragon City because the 6th princess, He Yu, wanted to meet her savior. Lu Bin knew where Lin Jin lived, so he paid him a visit. But Lin Jin wasn't home. Lu Bin wasn't in a hurry. He sat down at a nearby tea stall, ordered a pot of tea, and slowly sipped on it while waiting for Lin Jin to return. However, he didn't expect the sky to turn dark and no one to return. Lu Bin was dumbfounded. He mused, where did Lin Jin run off to? However, he figured that no matter how busy Lin Jin was, he should be back by now since it was already dark. Hence, he continued waiting. When the tea stall closed for the day, Lu Bin leaped up and sat on the roof of a nearby house. It was late at night but Lin Jin was still nowhere to be seen. Lu Bin couldn't sit still anymore. He suddenly thought of a possibility. Could it be that Lin Jin was in the house? That was a possibility. Seeing that it was already late at night, Lu Bin couldn't resist leaping into Lin Jin's yard. The moment his feet touched the ground, Lu Bin sensed danger. It was as if this was a forbidden land, a dragon's lair and a tiger's den, a sea of fire. Lu Bin had spent half his life in the military and had been through too many life-threatening situations. He had always trusted his instinct. But how could there be danger in this tiny yard? Lu Bin began to doubt himself. Instead of moving, he called out to the house, "Appraiser Lin, are you home?" Using a spell, Lin Jin's voice couldn't be heard from outside the yard. But from inside the house, his voice would be loud and clear. Even if someone was sound asleep inside, they would definitely be able to hear him with his voice. After a while, there was no response. There should be no one in the house. That was odd. Lu Bin couldn't figure out where Lin Jin was going in the middle of the night. Did he have another house somewhere else? That was a possibility. It's my fault for being careless. I should have checked first. Annoyed, Lu Bin decided to go out. But suddenly, he looked up and saw a rooster standing a few steps in front of him. The rooster didn't make a sound when it walked and Lu Bin didn't pay it much attention, so he had no idea when it came running over. There were quite a few families in Maple City who kept chickens to crow, so it wasn't strange at all. However, the rooster in front of him was very strange. Nothing could be seen from its appearance. At most, it looked more majestic than the average rooster and its feathers were of a better color. What was odd was the chicken's gaze. It was sizing him up. Under the chicken's gaze, Lu Bin actually felt a sense of crisis. What the hell was going on? The former general of the left, who was now one of the royal family's consecrators, was sensing danger from a chicken? Lu Bin knew that roosters were territorial. It was normal for him to be viewed as an enemy by the roosters here after entering the yard. But the question was, where did that inexplicable sense of danger come from? Lu Bin looked at the rooster whose feathers were starting to stand on end and finally realized what was going on. This wasn't an ordinary rooster but a beast of a high rank. It was at least rank 3. Only a ferocious beast of this level could make him feel threatened. I didn't expect Appraiser Lin's yard to have a rank 3 beast. Lu Bin knew that Lin Jin wasn't a simple character, so he wasn't too surprised. He planned to leave the yard. But just then, he felt a gust of wind behind him. His heart skipped a beat and he immediately turned around to launch a palm strike. Smack! Lu Bin felt like he had struck something. But at the same time, his shirt was lacerated by the sharp claws. If he hadn't reacted quickly enough to take a step back, he would have been injured. Lu Bin was startled. Looking ahead, he could vaguely make out the silhouette of a wolf in the darkness. The wolf was large and slender. Its claws were as sharp as foot-long blades, and it exuded a terrifying aura. Another rank 3 beast. Lu Bin's scalp was numb. To think that there were 2 rank 3 beasts in this seemingly ordinary yard. And both of them had unique bloodlines. This wolf beast that could hide in the dark must have activated its bloodline, or else it wouldn't have this ability. Lu Bin knew his own capabilities. He was on the 6th realm of his blood contract, while his pet beast was only rank 3. Although his pet beast was unique, a rare beast among rare beasts, it would still be dangerous for him to face off against 2 rank 3 beasts at once. Moreover, if a fight really broke out, he wouldn't be able to explain himself to Lin Jin. Lu Bin immediately retreated. Fortunately, his skill was unique. With a tap of his toes, he soared into the air like a great rock. With a single step, he flew more than 100 feet away and leaped out of the yard. Strangely enough, the sense of danger disappeared the moment he left the yard. That large rooster and the wolf in the dark didn't chase after him. Lu Bin steadied himself and smiled bitterly. To think that a person of his status had actually suffered a setback in this small courtyard. Moreover, he had even suffered a loss. If word of this got out, no one would believe it. Then, he realized that this Appraiser Lin was no ordinary person. Although rank 3 beasts weren't rare in an intermediate country like the Jade Dragon Kingdom, they weren't everywhere either. Only prominent families, friar associations, and the government would have them. Lin Jin's yard actually had 2 of these beasts. Come to think of it, if the yard's guards were rank 3 beasts, Then Lin Jin's pet beast must be at least rank 3 as well. That meant 3 rank 3 beasts. At this thought, Lu Bin's eyelids twitched. However, this only proved that Lin Jin was extraordinary. Lu Bin was sure that Lin Jin had a powerful backer. Otherwise, Lin Jin couldn't have achieved so much at such a young age. It made sense. How could someone who could give away the 9 water floating cloud pills prescription so casually be an ordinary person? Lu Bin's curiosity toward Lin Jin grew. Jade Dragon Kingdom is currently in a critical period with troubles both internally and externally. If this Lin Jin is really useful, I can recommend him to the royal family. Lu Bin mumbled to himself. Chapter 176. Since Lin Jin wasn't around, he could only continue waiting. Lu Bin was mocking himself. With his status, even if he wanted to meet Maple City's city lord, he should be the one waiting for him. When had he ever waited for anyone else? But ever since he met Lin Jin, he had always been at a disadvantage. He was the one who came to apologize and beg for medicine. And now, he was the one who had to wait in the cold for an entire night. Lu Bin would never tell anyone about this anyway. It was too embarrassing. However, it was all worth it. Just based on the fact that Lin Jin had saved the 6th princess from so much pain by giving her the prescription, and the fact that she wanted to meet him, Lu Bin wouldn't hesitate even if he had to wait the entire night. Finally, when the sun was about to rise, Lu Bin saw someone approaching from afar. It was Lin Jin. Beside him was the man's pet beast. Upon seeing this, Lu Bin immediately jumped down from the roof and stood in front of the man. Appraiser Lin. Lu Bin saluted. Lin Jin was startled. Anyone would be startled to see someone suddenly appear in front of them so early in the morning. Upon seeing Lu Bin, Lin Jin was dumbstruck. What are you doing here? Is the prescription ineffective? Lin Jin asked instinctively. Lu Bin was startled before understanding dawned on him. Appraiser Lin, you've misunderstood. I'm here today to thank you. The prescription for the 9 water floating cloud pill is very effective. My young master's condition has been alleviated, so he sent me here to thank you. Oh, I'm not here to cause trouble. Alright then. Lin Jin was worried that the museum's treatment method would be ineffective. This was just something he did out of convenience, and he had almost forgotten about it. If Lu Bin were to come back in a few months, Lin Jin might not even remember who he was. You don't have to thank me. I never ask for anything in return for my good deeds. If there's nothing else, you can go back now. Lin Jin knew Lu Bin wasn't an average person. Lin Jin could tell that from the last time they met. Not only was Lu Bin's cultivation strong, but his pet beast was also unique. He could even order an eagle beast around at will. People like him were either wealthy or respectable. However, the curse Lin Jin sensed from the cross-dressing woman was extremely terrifying. Even the Museum of Deadly Beasts treatment focused on delaying the effects of the curse. Based on this, Lin Jin could tell that she was in trouble. Since that was the case, it was better for him not to get involved. Appraiser Lin, please wait. Lu Bin hurried over. What a joke. He was here to invite Lin Jin to Jade Dragon City as a guest. How could he let Lin Jin send him away just like that? Is there anything else? Lin Jin glanced at him. Lu Bin could tell that Lin Jin had no intention of inviting him into his house, so he went straight to the point. I'm here to invite Appraiser Lin to accompany me to Jade Dragon City as a guest. My young master will treat you with great hospitality to thank Appraiser Lin for the prescription. Lu Bin was full of confidence, but reality slapped him hard in the face. Sorry, I don't have time. Lin Jin answered without hesitation. Lu Bin's hand trembled. He knew that the other party might refuse, but he didn't expect that the other party would refuse so decisively, as if he didn't even think about it. Appraiser Lin, I think you should reconsider because... Lu Bin wanted to remind Lin Jin of how rare this opportunity was. But before he could finish, Lin Jin shook his head. I really don't have time. Why don't you wait a little longer? Lin Jin wasn't lying. He really didn't have time. Tonight was the day the visitation hall reopened. Shouldn't he make some preparations? He planned to properly entertain Old Yi in the visitation hall. Other than that, he had to teach Shang'er and the others every day, especially the great white ape. Now that he was at a crucial point in his cultivation, he couldn't do without him. Moreover, the Friar Association's disciple tournament was just a few days away. This was related to the lesser dragon blood pill, and Xiao was next perfect evolution. Nothing must go wrong. Hence, no matter who invited him, Lin Jin wouldn't go. Lu Bin's eyelids twitched in anger, but there was nothing he could do. After all, he was here to invite Lin Jin. Lin Jin didn't have time, so he couldn't force him. Fortunately, Lin Jin didn't give him a definite answer. He only said that he didn't have time for now and that he would have time after things were over. Then I'll come back in a few days. Lu Bin could only do so. Thinking about it, he felt helpless. To think that there were people in the Jade Dragon Kingdom that he couldn't invite. But he couldn't afford to be angry. Lin Jin was the sixth princess savior and he had an extraordinary background. There must be an expert behind him. That's right, he had to investigate this thoroughly. Without guidance and care, how could he have 3 rank 3 pet beasts by his side? Even the crown prince of Jade Dragon Kingdom wouldn't amount to much. Lu Bin planned to look into Lin Jin's background. What he found earlier was definitely just the tip of the iceberg. Lu Bin left. Firstly, he had to explain the situation to the sixth princess. Secondly, he had to arrange for someone to investigate. When Lin Jin returned to the yard, Goldie and the Shadow Wolf immediately surrounded him. Goldie was clucking non-stop while the Shadow Wolf would growl occasionally. However, they couldn't get a word in edgewise. Lin Jin had another ability. He had long realized that he could read a pet beast's thoughts. Of course, it was just a basic understanding of what the pet beast wanted to do. Just like now. He knew that Goldie and the Shadow Wolf were trying to tell him that someone had broken into the yard while he was away. More importantly, they were the ones who chased the intruder out. It seemed like they were here to claim credit. Lin Jin patted Goldie and the Shadow Wolf on their heads, praising them. As for who the intruder was, Lin Jin knew that other than Lu Bin, it couldn't be anyone else. If anyone else were here, they wouldn't be able to escape. Only an expert like Lu Bin could leave so easily. Lin Jin had his own guesses about Lu Bin's identity. All in all, this Lu Bin was either rich or respectable. Moreover, he hailed from Jade Dragon City. Jade Dragon City was the capital of Jade Dragon Kingdom, a place where nobles and famous people gathered. It couldn't be compared to a small place like Maple City. Perhaps this Lu Bin and the cross-dressing woman were the nobles of Jade Dragon City. Lin Jin wasn't worried about offending Lu Bin. The reason was simple. The other party had to rely on Lin Jin. The curse on that cross-dressing woman was no laughing matter. After some research, Lin Jin found out that although the Museum of Deadly Beasts had a way to remove the curse, it was incredibly difficult. How difficult? Even Lin Jin wasn't confident he could eradicate the disease completely. They were both curses, but Tan Lin's was easier to remove. Hence, the difficulty of removing the curse differed due to the difference in level. Hence, even if it was for the sake of that cross-dressing woman, Lu Bin wouldn't dare to do anything to Lin Jin. Lin Jin knew this very well. Once he was done with his work, he could follow Lu Bin to Jade Dragon City for a visit. But now, he really didn't have the time. The most important thing today was to wait for the visitation hall to open. Because he needed to obtain the necessary materials for Xiaohua's perfect evolution from the visitors. If Lin Jin were to rely on himself, it would take him a year and a half just to gather these materials. He might even need to spend tens of thousands of silvers. This was probably the least he could afford. Some materials could only be purchased with spirit stones. Moreover, they were priceless because they were too rare. In other words, any high-level pet beast was a bottomless pit of money. Rank 2 was fine, but once it was promoted to rank 3, it wouldn't be something an average person or family could afford. Just like the zoo family, they needed a long time to prepare for the two-headed snake to evolve to rank 3. Lin Jin had been lucky before, but now that Xiaohu wanted to evolve from rank 3 to rank 4, with Lin Jin's current rate of earning, he wouldn't be able to support such a huge expenditure in a short period of time. Fortunately, the appearance of the visitation hall gave Lin Jin another channel to gather materials. Otherwise, if he wanted to evolve Xiaohua in a short period of time, not only would Lin Jin have to spend a huge sum of money, but he might also have to choose a normal evolution instead of a perfect one. Of course, Lin Jin knew he couldn't completely rely on the visitation hall. Who knew if the visitation hall would suddenly close down? Hence, Tangen had to consider how he could earn money. Without money, he could forget about evolving his pet beast. Lin Jin remained calm. Today, he was at the Beast Appraisal Association's hall to guide Zhao Ying and Lu Xiaoyun in beast appraisal. Now that Jia Qian was here, Lin Jin felt more at ease. Jia Qian's reputation as the #1 apprentice wasn't just for show. She was truly capable. Moreover, under Lin Jin's guidance, she had improved tremendously. At least to Lin Jin, Jia Qian was no different from an official beast appraiser now. She was already very close to becoming an official beast appraiser. Now that she had calmed down, her progress was naturally swift. Lin Jin was relaxed, but the same couldn't be said for the other visitors of the visitation hall. Inside the Friar Association, Yi Yuzhou had shut his door and declined all visitors for the entire day. Other than giving Yang Jie a lesson in the morning, no one was allowed to disturb him at other times. Of course, Yi Yuzhou had prepared a lot of rare materials he had collected over the years. Some of them he couldn't bear to use himself, so he took them with him to bring to the visitation hall. After all, this was what the curator had instructed him to do. Yi Yuzhou was a proud and arrogant person. In this life, there were only a handful of people who could convince him. His own teacher, Lu Yaogong, the emperor of Jade Dragon Kingdom, and finally, the curator. Moreover, in Yi Yuzhou's eyes, the curator was more mysterious and unfathomable. He still had many questions he wanted to ask the curator today, so he had to give him some benefit. Yi Yuzhou felt the same way as 7th Princess He Qing in the faraway Jade Dragon Kingdom's royal capital. She was in a hurry this time. A few days ago, she had obtained some blood from her sister, He Yu, and it was stored in a crystal bottle. Previously, the curator had said that he would have to see if the bestial soul curse could be broken. Either they could bring the cursed person here, which was obviously unrealistic, or they could bring the person's blood. Hence, He Qing had tried her best to convince He Yu to agree. However, the curse on He Yu was no trivial matter. He Qing was well aware of this. Could the curator see through it? Was there a way to break it? These were all unknowns. What if even the curator couldn't do anything? Hence, He Qing was anxious. Chapter 177. Inside an ordinary house, Madame Ghostchild sat quietly on a wooden stool with a swaddle in her arms. Those who didn't know her well would assume that she was a beautiful young married woman coaxing her child to sleep. Next to Madame Ghostchild were a few boxes. Even though they were tightly wrapped, one could still smell the thick medicinal aroma coming from them. She just sat there, and in the afternoon, a person walked in. This surprised Madame Ghostchild. After all, the villagers in her village were all scared away early in the morning. No one dared to set foot within a radius of several miles. This was how Madame Ghostchild looked at people. And she was used to this identity that instilled fear in others. Based on her experience, as long as she revealed her identity, no one would dare approach her. Except for a few idiots who were blinded by the huge bounty. But over the years, countless of such idiots had died. Another bounty hunter? Too bad I promised Curator not to kill anymore. It's so hard to hold it in. Madame Ghostchild's fingers were trembling slightly. Her pearly white teeth were clenched so tightly that they creaked. It was obvious that she was trying her best to hold it in. Holding it in was excruciating. She purposely revealed her identity to scare everyone away. She was also afraid that someone would wander around her and make her unable to resist the urge to kill. After all, she had been relieving her pain by killing all these years. She had gotten used to it, addicted to it. If it weren't for Curator's overwhelming influence, Madame Ghostchild wouldn't have listened to anyone else. But when she raised her head to see who it was, Madame Ghostchild's expression changed instantly. The person outside was a man. A man with a strong body but a stiff expression. His skin was purplish and he looked extremely strange. But that wasn't the strangest part. It was the fact that he was carrying a coffin on his back. Coffin Man. One of the villainous experts, an existence on par with Madame Ghostchild. From a certain perspective, he was even crueler than Ghostchild. He was a true god of slaughter. Coffin Man walked in without a care in the world. The coffin on his back immediately caused the room to become extremely crowded. Just then, a gust of wind blew over, carrying with it the nauseating stench of blood and corpses. Madame Ghostchild knew that Coffin Man must have killed not too long ago, and he must have killed quite a number of people. It didn't take her long to figure out that it must be the villagers hiding nearby. The villagers probably hadn't gone far as they were hiding in groups in the distance. Madame Ghostchild spared them, but they all died in the hands of Coffin Man. Just by standing there, Coffin Man exuded an indescribable pressure. Just by standing there, Coffin Man exuded an indescribably terrifying aura. The Coffin Man's voice was hoarse and low, and his tone of speech had a unique regional accent, like some remote mountain dialect. No matter how one listened to it, it was strange. What was strange was that coffin-carrying man's mouth didn't open, as if he was doing ventriloquism. Having said that, Ghost God, Ghostchild. Madame Ghostchild frowned and said coldly, "Don't come any closer. I don't like your stench." This was to be expected. Carrying a rotting coffin on one's back was indeed an unpleasant smell. Not to mention, the coffin-carrying man looked like he had never taken a bath in his entire life. Even from afar, one could smell the stench. The Coffin Man didn't take a single step forward. "Ghostchild, you and I are old acquaintances. Why keep me at arm's length?" Coffin Man let out an eerie laugh that sounded worse than a cry. Madame Ghostchild ignored him and looked at the sky instead. She knew that the mysterious visitation hall would open today, but she didn't know the exact time. But it didn't matter. She could wait. She could wait as long as she wanted. "I heard that you went to a few small countries a few days ago and only asked for items. You didn't kill anyone." Coffin Man was trying to strike up a conversation. After a pause he continued, "That doesn't seem like your style. Did something happen to you?" Ghostchild didn't even want to look at him. "It's none of your business." Coffin Man didn't respond to her rebuke. For a moment, the entire place fell into a terrifying silence. Coffin Man was chained to the coffin. The wind rustled the chains, causing them to rattle. He did not leave. Instead, he stood there. After a long time, he said, "Back then, we were in high spirits. We were so free and unfettered. We looked down on the world. If it wasn't for that incident, we might have already, bam!" An invisible force blasted out, directly pushing the coffin-carrying man back more than 2 zhang, knocking him out of the house and into the courtyard outside. The ground was marked with 2 marks left by the friction of the coffin-carrying man's feet, the earth cracked and the wooden beams broken. At the end of the long mark was Coffin Man. The chains on his body were buzzing from the impact. The clanking of the chains was crisp and chaotic. It sounded like a messy pipa tune. Coffin Man laughed, but his laughter was extremely unpleasant. "Why bother? Why bother?" Coffin Man sounded like he was singing a strange tune. Madame Ghost Child walked out of the house with her swaddle in her arms. Her facial features were horrifying. Without a word, she attacked. Coffin Man could only retaliate. The two villainous experts immediately started fighting. Loud explosions rang out. In just a few moments, half of the village was destroyed as if it had just been through a disaster. Even so, the two didn't stop. For a moment, they were locked in a fierce battle. The fight went on for a full hour. They fought from inside the village to outside. Up the mountain, mountains crumbled. Down the river, rivers shattered. However, the two were evenly matched. Although they were locked in a fierce battle, neither could do anything to the other. Suddenly, Madame Ghost Child stopped and turned to leave. Not fighting anymore? Coffin Man bellowed in anger. There was no response. Coffin Man cackled. Are you venting your frustrations? Why, Ghost Child? You're repressing yourself. Why are you doing this? Tell me, you're collecting all sorts of treasures, but you're not looking for someone to refine pills or medicine for you. Why? Also, how did you sever the symbiosis? Why isn't your baby dead, even after you severed the symbiosis? Tell me, Ghost Child. Madame Ghost Child didn't answer. She returned to the destroyed village, and returned to her previous house. This was one of the few places that wasn't destroyed. After the previous battle, Madame Ghost Child felt much better. After being repressed for so long, she needed a place to vent. She was just venting her murderous intent. That was all. Coffin Man followed her. His curiosity was piqued. Ghost Child, there must be a reason why you're doing this. It's fine if you don't want to tell me. Let me guess. Coffin Man paused for a moment before he started guessing. The secret symbiosis spell is an extremely profound spell. Ordinary people can't break it at all. If you forcefully cut off the secret symbiosis spell, you might be able to survive, but your baby should have died without a doubt. But it didn't die. You can't do this. If you could, you wouldn't have chosen the secret symbiosis spell to preserve your baby's life. This means that someone is helping you, and this person is extremely skilled. Coffin Man continued to speak to himself. Ghost Child patted her swaddling clothes rhythmically out of habit. She didn't seem to mind Coffin Man's words at all. Coffin Man didn't seem to mind either. He continued, Ghost Child, without the symbiosis, you won't suffer the backlash of the beast blood anymore. You won't have to suffer that kind of pain, but your personality can't have changed so quickly. I heard that a few days ago, someone offended you and even attacked you. But you only injured them and didn't kill them. That's very unusual. Also, you've worked so hard to collect these precious herbs, but you don't know anything about medicine. So, these are for someone else. Ghost Child looked at the sky outside. It was already dark. Just then, a noise came from the coffin on Coffin Man's back. It sounded like something was scratching the coffin inside. It was a horrifying sound. Coffin Man's face was contorted in pain. He even knelt on the ground as if he was trying his best to resist something. Ghost Child glanced at Coffin Man and sighed. She wanted to say something, but held back and said nothing. After a long time, Coffin Man's pain finally stopped. Coffin Man endured the pain throughout the entire process. Beneath his exposed flesh, there seemed to be something wriggling and wriggling, a terrifying sight to behold. The movements inside the coffin also fluctuated between loud and soft. After a while, Coffin Man's body was covered in a layer of sweat that dripped to the ground. After the pain subsided, the stench from Coffin Man's body seemed to have intensified. Even Madame Ghost Child, who was several meters away, could clearly smell the pungent odor. Coffin Man laughed bitterly and continued, This pain has been acting up more and more frequently recently. Ghost Child, I know you hate us. Back then, we, the 5 deities of Lingnan, were as close as brothers and sisters. But after that incident, there was a rift between us. We are all responsible for Old Goo's death back then, but at that time we had no choice. Old Goo's cultivation was the highest, and only he could block that thing and give us time to escape. Green Toad, Old Turtle, and I have always remembered this favor. All these years we have taken good care of you, and it is also because we owe Old Goo. In order to keep our pet beasts alive, we had no choice but to use the secret symbiosis. But this secret method has too many drawbacks. All these years we're all on the brink of death. I heard that Green Toad has given up. His pet beast is dead and he has become immortal. But he's not doing well either, living in fear every day, hiding from his enemies. Without a pet beast, if his enemies find him, he'll surely die. I'd rather die than live like this. Old Turtle thinks the same as me, but he can't hold on much longer. Ghost Baby, I've said so much just to tell you what we think. If you have a solution, please let us know. Consider it as a sign of our friendship in the past. Ghost Baby, I've said so much just to tell you what we think. If you have a solution, please tell us. Madam Ghost Child stopped patting the swaddle, but she remained silent. There seemed to be a grudge in her that hadn't dissipated yet. Coffin Man was observant enough to notice that Madam Ghost Child was wavering. He knew this was a rare opportunity and he had to seize it. Chapter 178. Ghost Child, we've been living like ghosts these past few years. Because of the symbiosis technique and the backlash of the beast blood, both you and I have made many enemies. No matter how high your cultivation base is, you can't do anything on your own. I'm afraid you don't know how many disasters Old Turtle and I have withstood for you over the years. Do you really have the heart to watch us die? Coffin Man's voice was filled with pleading. Ghost Child, we've been living like ghosts these past few years. Madam Ghost Child remained silent. Coffin Man didn't speak either. They just stood there, watching, waiting, and anticipating. Finally, Coffin Man sighed and turned to leave. Just as he was about to step out of the door, Madam Ghost Child finally said, "Old Coffin, wait here. When the door opens, I'll see if I can bring you in." Coffin Man was stunned. He was pleasantly surprised that Madam Ghost Child was willing to help him. Just the fact that she called him Old Coffin meant that she still cared about their past relationship. And that was enough. For the sake of his pet beast, Coffin Man and Madam Ghost Child had no choice but to maintain symbiosis. But it was like a slow suicide. Sooner or later, he would die. Hence, when he realized that Madam Ghost Child had severed the symbiosis but her pet beast was still alive, he knew she had found a solution. They had been searching for this solution for far too long. Now that there was a glimmer of hope, how could he not be excited? But he was also confused. Door? What door? Ghost Child, the door you're talking about is... Coffin Man asked softly, but before he could finish, Ghost Child cut him off. Stop asking. I don't even know the specifics myself. Besides, I'm not sure if I can bring you in. Sure enough, Coffin Man stopped asking. He merely looked around curiously. According to Madam Ghost Child's plan, the door would open here. Otherwise, she wouldn't be waiting here. But there was no door here. Right, give me some of your blood and Zombie Cthulhu's blood, Madam Ghost Child suddenly said. Coffin Man was confused, but he still extracted the blood and poured it into a porcelain bowl. Symbiosis. My blood and Zombie Cthulhu's have fused into one. Is this bowl enough? Coffin Man asked. Madam Ghost Child nodded. If you can't go in later, wait for me here. I'll ask around for you. Ask who? Coffin Man sensed the crux of the issue. Sure enough, there was an expert helping Ghost Baby. Curator. As Madam Ghost Child spoke, she suddenly felt a ripple in front of her. The next moment, a crack appeared in front of her. However, compared to the last time, the fissure was much more stable this time, and there was no strong suction force. Madam Ghost Child sprang to her feet with excitement written all over her face. Curator? Coffin Man was stunned. Obviously, he did not see the crack that appeared out of nowhere. Madam Ghost Child noticed this as well. You didn't see anything? Madame Ghostchild probed. Coffin Man was stunned. See what? Nothing. Madame Ghostchild didn't explain. She understood that the mysterious visitation hall was probably only accessible to people like her with a visitor token. As for the others, they couldn't even see it, let alone sneak in. As such, the idea of bringing the coffin-carrying man along was too childish, so he could only give up. Madame Ghostchild knew she had to go in immediately, so she used a secret technique to float the wooden boxes containing the herbs and the porcelain bowl containing the coffin man's blood into the air. Then, she said to Coffin Man, "Wait here." Having said that, she stepped into the crack. To Coffin Man, Madame Ghostchild simply vanished into thin air. It wasn't a smokescreen or an invisibility spell. She really did vanish into thin air. There wasn't even a trace of her aura. It was just like a teleportation spell. Coffin Man stood rooted to the spot, dumbfounded. Even though he had lived for more than 100 years and had seen many things, he had never seen anything like this. Curator, interesting. Interesting. The visitation hall. The visitors entered one after another without any delay, including visitor number 8, the Tyrannosaurus old man who called himself Old Tian. He-Ching looked around and greeted her acquaintances, Black Crow, Jiang Ziki, and Yiyujo. As for the Tyrannosaurus old man, Old Tian, He-Ching disliked his bad temper. Madame Ghostchild number 9 was someone He-Ching didn't dare to provoke. She was afraid to even look at her, so she tried her best not to provoke her. Curator isn't here yet. He-Ching glanced at the balcony on the second floor. The metal door was tightly shut. She gripped the crystal bottle tightly in her hand, clearly anxious. This curator is very strange. I've asked around after I left, but there's no such expert in this world, Old Tian suddenly said. Unlike the first time he came, the current Old Tian was no longer as arrogant as before. He was no fool. None of the people here were easy to deal with, especially that curator. After careful consideration, he knew that the man was the most terrifying existence here. Moreover, he had been asking around about Madame Ghostchild's reputation. She was a famous expert in the villainous path, someone he couldn't afford to offend. However, Old Tian was quick-witted. He immediately realized that this was an opportunity. What opportunity? A chance to increase his social circle. The visitors of the visitation hall were not simple people. If he could befriend them, it would definitely be beneficial to him. Hence, this time, Old Tian changed his strategy. He was humble and took the initiative to start a conversation. He wanted to start a conversation and use this as a pretext to get closer. Unfortunately, no one responded to him. It was rather awkward. Yiyujo looked at Madame Ghostchild and then Black Crow. These two were the strongest people in the visitation hall after him, especially Madame Ghostchild. This villainous expert had a great reputation, but of course it was a notorious one. It's better if I don't interact with them, Yiyujo thought. This time, almost all of them had a request, hoping to receive the curator's guidance. Especially Yiyujo. Although he had obtained the Soaring Cloud Flood Dragon's evaluation report with a detailed evolution method, there were a few parts he couldn't understand and he needed the curator's guidance. Black Crow shared the same thought. His pet beast was also evolving from rank 4 to rank 5, so he too had various problems. Among them, only Jiang Ziki looked calm and unhurried. He was probably the one with the best mental state. At that moment, He-Ching realized something. There didn't seem to be any new visitors this time. It was still the same number of first and second visitors. However, she didn't think too much about it. It must be the curator's arrangement. After a long wait, the steel door to the second floor opened. Everyone perked up immediately, straightening their backs and bowing. The curator was here. Lin Jin was still dressed the same way he did last time, wearing a mask and looking majestic. The visitors were looking forward to it, and so was Lin Jin. He was looking forward to two things. One was to see if the visitors had managed to collect the treasures he needed. This was related to Xiao Hua's perfect evolution. The other was to teach old Yi a lesson. How dare this guy make things difficult for him in the Friar Association? He had to teach old Yi a lesson today. He had no ulterior motives other than to vent his anger. Lin Jin swept his gaze across the room and noticed no new visitors. He didn't think too much about it either. As the curator, Lin Jin had no idea when the visitation hall would have new visitors. "Curator, you're finally here." He Qing was the first to speak. She was the visitation hall's first visitor and had a cheerful personality. She had something urgent to attend to, so she seemed a little impatient. As she spoke, He Qing waved the crystal bottle in her hand. "Curator, you mentioned that if you want to remove the bestial soul curse, you need the patient's blood. I've got it." Lin Jin nodded and reached out to retrieve the crystal bottle. This crystal bottle was obviously very precious, and the average person wouldn't be able to get their hands on it. The blood inside was still fresh. Lin Jin opened the lid and dipped his finger into it. Immediately, a strange expression appeared on his face. The Museum of Deadly Beasts could record information on all sorts of beasts, including bestial soul curses. After all, the source of these curses came from high-level beasts. The blood He Qing gave him contained a powerful bestial soul curse, but Lin Jin was very familiar with this bestial soul curse. It was recorded in the Museum of Deadly Beasts. That cross-dressing woman was afflicted with this curse. It was exactly the same. Was it the same curse on different people, or was it the same person? Lin Jin fell into deep thought. At the curator's silence, He Qing tensed up. She had full confidence in the curator. To He Qing, the curator was almost omnipotent, which was why she sought his help to save her sister, He Yu. But what if the curator couldn't do anything? He Qing didn't dare to imagine the consequences. Perhaps it was just as her sister said. This curse was incurable and death was inevitable. That must be the case. Otherwise, with the curator's personality, he wouldn't stay silent for so long. There must be no cure. At this thought, He Qing felt terrible. In her despair, tears began to trickle down her cheeks. "Why are you crying?" Lin Jin asked, puzzled. She was as lively as a bunny just a moment ago, so why was she crying all of a sudden? A woman's heart was truly unpredictable. He Qing asked sadly, "Curator, is my sister's curse incurable?" Clearly, He Qing was so upset that she made a slip of the tongue. Lin Jin was even more certain that He Qing's sister was that cross-dressing woman. However, he didn't say it was incurable, so why was she so sad? "When did I say it's incurable?" Lin Jin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This time, He Qing was stunned. After giving it some thought, the curator really didn't say that. She was the one who guessed it. Then, "Curator, this..." He Qing stammered as a glimmer of hope rose in her heart. Lin Jin answered, "It's a little troublesome, but it can still be cured." His words calmed He Qing down and she smiled through her tears. For some reason, she trusted the curator. If he said there was a cure, then there must be one. "But to be cured, I have to see your sister in person," Lin Jin said. Lin Jin was telling the truth. This bestial soul curse was extremely unique. Even the Museum of Deadly Beasts' method of breaking it was extremely complicated and required the use of the pulse-seeking technique. In this world, Lin Jin might be the only one who knew this technique, so he had to treat it himself. He Qing realized how difficult this would be. After all, her sister, He Yu, couldn't enter the visitation hall. "There's no rush. I've observed her blood and your sister will be fine for the time being. Who knows, maybe her condition will improve in a few days." Lin Jin wasn't bluffing. Lu Bin had invited him to Jade Dragon City as a guest, but Lin Jin was too busy, so he rejected the invitation. However, after the Friar Association's tournament, he would probably make a trip to Jade Dragon City so he could treat her while he was at it. Hence, when he said her sister's condition would improve in a few days, He meant that he would treat her personally. He-Ching obviously didn't know about this. She simply trusted the curator, and since he said it would be fine for the time being, she was relieved. Chapter 179. Now that He-Ching's matter was settled, she retreated happily. Meanwhile, old Tian sneered inwardly, musing that the curator was just being perfunctory. Only a naive girl would believe such nonsense. Serves him right to be fooled. Of course, he dared not say this out loud. The memory of his rank 3 pet beast being scared unconscious by the curator was still fresh in his mind. Right, curator, I've gathered some of the herbs you asked me to gather. But I've never even heard of some of them. Suddenly remembering something important, He-Ching quickly took out a wooden box. It looked like it was filled to the brim. Lin Jin took it over to take a look. There were several types of precious herbs inside that could be worth up to 10,000 silvers. Needless to say, this girl was generous. For this alone, Lin Jin was determined to help her fulfill her wish. Hence, even if he didn't have a good impression of her sister, he would still make a trip to Jade Dragon City for He-Ching's sake. With He-Ching taking the lead, the others suppressed their desires and took out the items they had collected as if they were presenting their treasures. Jiang Ziki had brought the most variety of herbs, and it was obvious that he had put in a lot of effort. However, there were some crucial treasures missing. It was probably because he couldn't find them. Black Crow had brought quite a number of items as well, including several extremely precious treasures. For example, the exotic fire crystal. No one in Maple City had ever heard of this item before. Adding some during pelletization could greatly improve the quality of the pill. Who knew Black Crow would be able to get his hands on one? Not bad. Lin Jin accepted it. Although Black Crow wasn't very cooperative at first, he became much better after he came to his senses. Hence, if Black Crow needed any help from now on, Lin Jin would do his best to help. The quality of Madame Ghost Child's materials was also of high quality. Among them were some of the most important herbs for pelletization, and she managed to get her hands on them. Of course, the materials they collected from each other definitely overlapped and complemented each other. Lin Jin now had all the materials he needed. Lin Jin was overjoyed. If he had to collect them himself, it might take years, and he might not even be able to collect them all. The amount of effort and money he had to spend would be astronomical. The benefits of the visitation hall were on full display here. Among the visitors, old Tian didn't bring anything with him. But that was fine. If he didn't pay, Lin Jin wouldn't return the favor. Yiyujo did bring a wooden box with him, but Lin Jin didn't accept his gift. Lin Jin didn't even spare it a glance before returning it. Yiyujo was obviously taken aback. Unbeknownst to him, Lin Jin had achieved one of his goals today, and was currently working on the other. Yiyujo was also a veteran. Other than old Tian, the curator had accepted everyone's belongings. Only his own was returned untouched. There was obviously something going on here. Yiyujo's state of mind was in a mess. One had to know that this was very similar to when he accepted tea from a disciple, but because he was not satisfied with that disciple, he purposely did not accept the tea from that disciple, to express their dissatisfaction. Generally speaking, the smarter disciples would know that they had angered the teacher. Of course, he had to think about what the problem was and try his best to fix it. The current situation was very similar to this. In front of the curator, Yiyujo naturally did not dare to put on airs. He knew that he must have offended the curator in some way. Otherwise, the curator would not have targeted him like this. But what was wrong? Yiyujo couldn't figure it out. Currently, the curator was answering Black Crow's questions. Black Crow asked about the problems he encountered during his evolution from rank 4 to rank 5. Black Crow wouldn't be able to solve these problems on his own. However, the curator answered each and every one of his questions. Black Crow benefited greatly from this and thanked him repeatedly in excitement. This made Yiyujo very envious. He had so many questions he wanted to ask, but he didn't know how to start. As for asking Yang Jie about pet beast evolution methods, Yiyujo had long forgotten about it. He couldn't even ask his own questions, so how could he care about Yang Jie's pet beast? Jiang Ziki also asked some questions, but they were related to pet beasts. Similarly, the curator gave him profound answers. Throughout the entire process, Yiyujo felt like an ant on a hot pan, tormented. Everyone else noticed this as well. The curator was obviously picking on Yiyujo. However, no one dared to speak up for Yiyujo. Even He Qing was wondering if Yiyujo had done something to provoke the curator. Right now, Yiyujo was like a fish thrown onto the shore, left to dry. Sunbathing. Yiyujo couldn't hold it in anymore. He took a step forward, wanting to speak. He had to break this stalemate himself. However, before he could speak, the curator suddenly said, "Old Yi, if there's nothing else, you can go back first." Yiyujo felt like he was struck by lightning. This was just like the tone and methods he used on his disciples who had made mistakes. What was going on? Yiyujo's heart was in a state of turmoil. Naturally, with his current status, being treated like this by someone who didn't even mention the reason made him feel a little indignant and even angry. He really wanted to leave. At most, he would never come back again. But honestly, he didn't have the courage to do so. At his age, how many more opportunities could he have for a breakthrough? Pet beasts, in particular, were more important than his own realm. A pet beast's rank determined a country's level. Just from this point alone, one could tell how important it was. His soaring cloud flood dragon had reached rank 4 a long time ago. If it weren't for this fortuitous encounter in the visitation hall where he met the curator, Yiyujo knew very well that his pet beast would never be able to evolve even if he died. He had consulted many reputable beast appraisers about this, but all of them were at their wits' end. Only the curator was able to provide an evolution method, so there was no doubt about it. In other words, if his pet beast wanted to evolve, he could only rely on the curator. This was the only way. Although the curator had given him an evolution method, it was still extremely difficult to evolve from rank 4 to rank 5. If he had to figure it out on his own, it would take him at least 3 to 5 years. Yiyujo didn't want to wait. Even if he could, he didn't want to offend the curator for no reason. This wasn't fair. When a criminal was put on trial in a court of law, the criminal should at least be informed of his crimes before he was sentenced. Mustering his courage, Yiyujo stepped forward and saluted. "I don't understand how I've offended you, curator. Please enlighten me. If I've done anything wrong, I will surely correct myself." Under the mask, Lin Jin smiled, musing, "Yiyujo, I can't tell you how you've made things difficult for me in the Friar Association. Wouldn't that expose me? So sorry, I'm only here today to vent my anger by making things difficult for you." However, he couldn't just keep quiet. Hence, Lin Jin scoffed. "How did you offend me? Think about it carefully. Come back when you've figured it out." How satisfying. This was how Lin Jin reprimanded Yiyujo, the #1 master teacher of Maple City's Friar Association. Of course, once this incident was over, Lin Jin's anger would subside and he wouldn't make things difficult for Yiyujo anymore. But for now, it was impossible for him to give Yiyujo guidance. Lin Jin also noticed a feather in Yiyujo's hand. A white feather. He was most likely here to seek an evaluation report and an evolution method. Yiyujo was most likely here to seek an evolution method for Yang Jie's pet beast. Hence, Lin Jin decided to shut Yiyujo up so he wouldn't have to reject him later. The disciple tournament was just around the corner, so how could Lin Jin possibly help Yang Jie improve his pet beast's rank and cause trouble for himself? This was the crux of Lin Jin's plan against Yiyujo. If Yiyujo were to really seek an evolution method for Yang Jie's pet beast, should Lin Jin tell him or not? Yiyujo lowered his head in deep thought, as if trying to figure out how he had offended the curator. Lin Jin ignored him. He glanced at Madame Ghostchild and the latter bowed to Lin Jean. Lin Jean didn't waste any time. He had previously given Madame Ghostchild a treatment method, and after checking on her pet beast today, he noticed that her condition was better than before. However, she still needed some time to recuperate. Using his coiled wire needle, Lin Jean inserted the needle into Madame Ghostchild's pet beast's acupoints to clear up her veins and dissolve the accumulated medicinal effects. This was the crowd's first time witnessing Lin Jin's coiled wire needle technique. They were all dumbfounded, unable to figure out that such a technique existed in this world. After a long while, Lin Jean withdrew his needle. "Alright, it's no big deal. She just needs to follow my treatment method and in a few months, she should be able to fully recover. However, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for her to return to her peak condition," Lin Jean said. Madame Ghostchild was stunned. She could clearly tell that Lin Jean was implying something else. Lin Jean had studied Madame Ghostchild's babyface spider in the Museum of Deadly Beasts. This babyface spider was originally a powerful rank 5 pet beast, but due to its severe injuries, its rank had fallen. In other words, only an existence surpassing rank 5 could injure this babyface spider. Lin Jean didn't ask for details last time, but this time, he had to get to the bottom of it. After some thought, Lin Jean said, "Madame Ghostchild, your pet beast was originally a rank 5 but due to its severe injuries, its rank has fallen. You had no choice but to use symbiosis to keep your pet beast alive. I'd like to know how it got injured. Can you tell me?" Lin Jean wasn't just curious. He wanted to see if he could get his hands on the hair or blood of the creature that injured the babyface spider. If he wasn't mistaken, it was definitely a rank 6 pet beast. A cultivator? In this era, such a strong person didn't exist. No cultivator could injure a rank 5 pet beast on their own. Madame Ghostchild suddenly said, "Curator, I'll tell you in detail later. For now I have a favor to ask." As she said that, she took out the putrid blood from that night. "This is the blood of an old friend of mine. Just like me, he used symbiosis. He doesn't have much time left, so I would like to ask for your help. However, he can't come in, so I can only take his blood first." Madame Ghostchild took out the blood of Coffin Man. Lin Jean flicked the needle, and in the blink of an eye, it was dipped in blood. In an instant, there was a commotion inside the museum. Rank 4 pet beast, Zombie Cthulhu. Dual attributes of wood and earth. Status: severe injuries. Symbiosis. Before Lin Jean was a soft-bodied creature that looked like a sea mother. It looked like a head with several straps growing out of it, but it also looked like tentacles. Overall, it looked terrifying and it could survive on land. Zombie Cthulhu. This was Lin Jin's first time hearing this name. Chapter 180. There were many types of beasts in this world, and some of them existed only in legend. Just like this zombie Cthulhu, Lin Jean couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. Moreover, this zombie Cthulhu was injured by the same thing as Madame Ghostchild's babyface spider, but his condition might not be as good as the babyface spider. One of them was more seriously injured, and the other was that this zombie Cthulhu was only rank 4. Unlike the babyface spider, which was rank 5 and dropped a rank after being attacked. The reason why he wasn't dead was because of his unique physique. Secondly, someone had used the symbiosis spell to keep him alive. Looking at the treatment method, it was also different from the babyface spider. However, this zombie Cthulhu was easier to treat than the babyface spider. Again, different attributes and abilities led to different treatment method. But no matter which method it was, the symbiosis spell had to be severed first. Otherwise, the blood contract owner wouldn't be able to live for long. With a plan in mind, Lin Jean glanced at Ghostchild. As if sensing the curator's gaze, the latter bowed again. "It won't be difficult to save him." Lin Jin's words displayed the curator's immense confidence. Ghostchild was excited. "Please enlighten me, curator." Zombie Cthulhu is of the wood attribute and loves the earth. He is filled with the aura of death and is born in burial grounds. He has accumulated centuries of extreme energy and is an immortal being. Find a place for your old friend and dig 9 feet into the ground before burying him. Before you cover him up, sever the symbiosis spell. I'll give you a few pills to feed to him and the zombie Cthulhu. In 3 to 5 days, they'll be safe and they'll be able to break out of the ground. That was it. Ghost Child was dumbfounded. It was that simple? Had it been someone else, she would never believe it. But since it was the curator, she had to believe it. After giving it some thought, she realized that this method wasn't as simple as she thought. First of all, this method could only be thought of by someone extremely knowledgeable. As the saying went, it's easy for those who know how to do it, but difficult for those who don't. If the curator hadn't mentioned it, no matter how simple it was, she and Coffin Man would never have thought of it. But no matter what, if the curator said there was hope, then there was hope. Madame Ghost Child thanked him profusely. But there's something I have to say first, Lin Jean added, his voice stern. Please speak, curator. I'm listening. Madame Ghost Child was being cautious. She knew that the curator wouldn't treat her for no reason. There must be a condition. Whether it was Madame Ghost Child or the person who owned Zombie Cthulhu, they were definitely the strongest in the world. People like them might come in handy in the future. Of course, Lin Jean was referring to himself, not the curator. The curator's might was only limited to the visitation hall. Lin Jean knew this well. In the visitation hall, all the strong had to behave themselves. Here, Lin Jean reigned supreme. But outside, the situation was different. In the outside world, he was still too weak. Sometimes, people needed to think about the future and plan for the future, and the visitors of the visitation hall were a very important resource. But to use someone like Madame Ghost Child, he had to use both carrot and stick to establish the curator's absolute authority. How to establish prestige? That was, if he said it, the other party would have to listen to him. I told you not to kill anymore. Did you listen to me? Lin Jean asked. Lin Jean had no idea if she had continued killing, so he decided to bluff her. Startled, Ghost Child quickly said, I've never forgotten what the curator told me previously. Ever since I left, I haven't killed a single person. If I'm lying to you, may I die a horrible death. Lin Jean observed that she was probably telling the truth. No killing. This was the rule Lin Jean had set for her. If she obeyed him, it would mean that she feared and respected the curator. Just like how beast tamers set a red line for their pet beast. The goal wasn't the red line itself, but to make the beast understand fear and obey orders. Alright, go and tell your old friend that he can save him, but he has to agree to this condition of mine. He's not allowed to kill the innocent, and he's not allowed to kill again. If he disobeys, even if it's just one person, then you can imagine the consequences. Since it was free to scare people, Lin Jean made a threat. Madame Ghost Child's heart thumped wildly, but she quickly nodded in agreement. Today, the curator's presence was impressive. Madame Ghost Child could be considered a famous expert in the villainous community. In the outside world, only others were afraid of her. When had she ever been afraid of anyone? Even when she encountered enemies stronger than her, she had never been afraid. And yet, in this visitation hall, facing the masked curator, she felt a tinge of fear. As for her pet beast, the baby-faced spider, it had been feigning sleep ever since they entered, not daring to make a single sound. And it was all because of the curator's presence. Moreover, the curator was a truly remarkable figure. With just a bowl of decaying blood, he was able to call out Zombie Cthulhu. Other than the curator, no one else in this world could do this. Every little detail proved how powerful the curator was. Reverence had taken root. Madame Ghost Child began recounting her past. She told them how her pet beast was injured. Everyone here already knew who she was, so there was no need for her to hide her identity. While Lin Jean didn't think much of her past, The others were dumbfounded. Black Crow was stunned while Yi Yujo's expression turned solemn. The Lingnan deities. To think that Madame Ghostchild used to be one of them. Yi Yujo couldn't contain the shock he felt. Because when the Lingnan deities became famous, he was still a greenhorn. Back then, he was probably just a teenager. The Lingnan deities were famous back then. But for some reason, they suddenly vanished without a trace. This was a strange incident that many people discussed, but no one knew the truth. To think that one of the Lingnan deities was Madame Ghostchild. After so many years, the Lingnan deities should be over 100 years old. So why did Madame Ghostchild look so young, only in her early 30s? Could she have really become an immortal? After all, even though they were known as the Lingnan deities, everyone knew that it was just a title. Immortals had long since ceased to exist in this world. Madame Ghostchild's next narration was even more shocking. Back then, we were invincible in the 7 states of Lingnan, so we couldn't help but be arrogant. We happened to hear about an immortal's ruin, so we went there. Who knew we'd run into so much trouble? An ancient demon was actually sealed in that immortal's ruin. We accidentally released it and ended up encountering misfortune. If we had known, we would never have gone there. At this point, Madame Ghostchild's expression was filled with regret. Lin Jin was both curious and excited at this point. How many immortals' ruins are there in this world? He asked a rather silly question. Before Madame Ghostchild could answer, Black Crow beat her to it and said, "Curator, there are many immortals' ruins in this world, but the real ones wouldn't seal a demon inside. I'm sure what Madame Ghostchild and the others encountered wasn't an immortal's cave but a prison." It was obvious that Black Crow was an expert who had probably raided tombs quite a bit. Madame Ghostchild nodded at Black Crow's explanation. "That's right. It was a prison. We didn't know what was going on, so we opened it. What happened next was simple. The demon sealed in the prison was extremely powerful. Of the Lingnan deities, 1 died and 4 were injured. Since then, they vanished without a trace. Madame Ghostchild's pet beast was also severely injured. Left with no choice, she could only use symbiosis to protect her pet beast. This brought about another problem, and that was the bestial blood backlash. Years of bestial blood backlash tormented her. If she hadn't entered the visitation hall, she probably wouldn't have lived much longer. In other words, she was quite lucky. That old friend of mine was one of the Lingnan deities. Let's not talk about his title back then. Now everyone calls him Coffin Man. Just as Madame Ghostchild said this, Black Crow's eyes lit up while Yi Yujo frowned. Needless to say, Coffin Man's notoriety was on par with Madame Ghostchild's. Everyone shuddered at Madame Ghostchild's description, instinctively feeling fear toward that demon. After all, that was an existence that easily crushed the once insufferably arrogant Lingnan deities. However, Lin Jin's words shattered the oppressive and fearful atmosphere. "Do you still remember where that place is?" Madame Ghostchild was surprised. Lin Jin added, "When I have time, I'd like to go take a look." The group was at a loss for words. The curator didn't seem to care about that demon at all. His tone was calm, as if he was talking about a sightseeing tour. As expected of the curator, he was incomparably domineering. Despite knowing there was a tiger in the mountain, he still chose to go there. Madame Ghostchild gave a rough location, but Lin Jin had never heard of it before. It was located deep in the mountains of Lingnan's 7 prefectures, probably thousands of miles away from Maple City, where Lin Jin resided. This extinguished the fire of passion in Lin Jin's heart. He would have to think about this at length. Now that the problem was solved, Lin Jin had the perfect materials for Xiaohua's evolution. He planned to go back and study them. It would be best if he could evolve Xiaohua before the Disciples' Tournament. Then, obtaining first place in the tournament would be a piece of cake. Just then, old Tian, who had been silent all this while, spoke up. "Curator, I have something to ask." Lin Jin glanced at him. This old man had been arrogant the last time he came. Lin Jin had clearly given them a mission to collect some medicinal ingredient. Even if it was a small amount, they should have brought some with them as a sign of respect. Yet, old Tian had brought nothing with him. Now that he wanted to ask, Lin Jin couldn't be bothered with him. Whatever it is, we'll talk about it next time. Lin Jin dismissed him with a single sentence. Old Tian's expression froze, clearly resentful. However, he didn't dare to say anything. Although he was indignant, he knew that the curator wasn't someone to be trifled with. Even Madame Ghostchild was obedient and respectful to the curator. Old Tian only had a rank 3 pet beast. If he offended the curator, it would only bring him trouble. Chapter 181. The curator had left, but the visitors in the visitation hall hadn't left. Yiyujo wore a solemn expression. He was still trying to figure out how he had offended the curator to anger him. Not only did the curator refuse to give him pointers, but the curator also refused to take away the herbs he offered. This was no trivial matter as it concerned his pet beast's evolution. Yiyujo knew he had to do something to appease the curator's anger. But the problem was, the curator didn't say anything, so Yiyujo couldn't figure out what the problem was. Old Yi, how did you offend the curator? Instead of leaving immediately, Black Crow approached him and asked. At first, the visitors were wary of each other, but after a few interactions, they became familiar with each other. Of course, in Black Crow's eyes, not everyone was worthy of his conversation. Yiyujo was one of them, and so was Madame Ghostchild. The curious He Qing also approached him. Senior Yi, if you've offended the curator, you should apologize to him. The curator is a magnanimous man, so I'm sure he won't hold it against you. Even Jiang Ziki and Madame Ghostchild didn't leave immediately. Instead, they gathered around to hear what gave old Yi the courage to offend the curator. Yiyujo looked helpless. I really don't know. This is my second time here and the second time I've met the curator. Even if I wanted to offend him, I would need to find the right opportunity. Just then, the black-bellied Black Crow gave it some thought and suggested a possibility. You might not have offended the curator directly. Old Yi, did you do something to upset the curator somewhere else? That was one possibility. Yiyujo wasn't dumb, so he immediately thought of this possibility. However, he had been cooped up in the Friar Association all this time and rarely stepped out. How could he have offended a mysterious expert like the curator? He still couldn't figure it out. Have you ever done anything that people don't like, or have you ever targeted someone? This time, it was Madame Ghostchild who spoke. She was curious as to how old Yi offended the curator. Even a she-devil had a gossipy heart. Yiyujo was even more confused now. Because even if he had done something unpleasant or reprimanded someone, that shouldn't have anything to do with the curator. However, Madame Ghostchild's reminder was clearly a good direction. In the next moment, Yiyujo thought of someone. If it were anyone else, like Black Crow or Madame Ghostchild, they would have lost count of the number of people they had offended in 7 days. However, Yiyujo was different. Over the past 7 days, he had spent most of his time in seclusion, researching the soaring cloud flood dragon's evolution method. He hadn't had much contact with anyone. The only person he had targeted was one person, Lin Jin. Yiyujo instinctively felt that he was thinking too much, but some things were very strange. The first time he thought about it, he felt that it was a fantasy story, but after thinking about it carefully, he found that the things that he thought were impossible at the beginning seemed to be possible, and the more he thought about it, the more likely it became. Yiyujo was like this now. His eyes widened as he tried to recall everything he knew about Lin Jin. Lin Jin was Maple City's youngest official rank 2 beast appraiser. Beast appraiser. Wouldn't that be the same as the curator's specialty? The curator was also an expert in beast appraisals. Also, this Lin Jin was so young that even the chief of Maple City's Beast Appraisal Association might not be as good as him. So who taught him his beast appraising skills? Besides, Yi Yuzhou recalled that Yang Jie had once fought Lin Jin. That was how Yang Jie described it. Lin Jin's attacks were swift and unpredictable. Yi Yuzhou didn't know what method he used, but he felt a sharp pain under his armpit, as if he was being pricked by a needle. Then, half of his body went numb. Coincidentally, he witnessed the curator using an acupuncture technique to treat Madame Ghostchild's pet beast today. Now that he thought about it, Lin Jin was most likely using the same acupuncture technique. At this thought, Yi Yuzhou's forehead was already drenched in sweat. Some things just couldn't stand the thought of it. The others could tell that Yi Yuzhou must have thought of something as well. Curious, they kept asking. Yi Yuzhou didn't say a word. He was still contemplating. In the past few days, he had only made things difficult for Lin Jin's external imagery technique, preventing him from being recorded in the spirit library. If Lin Jin was related to the curator, then everything made sense. That's right, there's also that external imagery technique. Yi Yuzhou had suspected that it was impossible for Lin Jin to have such a cultivation method, especially since the incantation was so profound. He must have been taught by an expert. Back then, Yi Yuzhou wanted Lin Jin to reveal the identity of that expert, but Lin Jin refused to divulge the information. Hence, Yi Yuzhou was angered and deliberately targeted Lin Jin. Now that he thought about it, could the expert Lin Jin mentioned be the curator? The possibility was too high. Yi Yuzhou's expression kept changing from green to white, making Heya and the others feel like they were being scratched by cats. They wanted nothing more than to force Yi Yuzhou to tell them everything he knew. However, even if Yi Yuzhou understood the crux of the matter now, it was even more impossible for him to say it. If he said it, the curator might even be unhappy. When that happened, there would be no way to salvage the situation. At this, Yi Yuzhou wanted to leave immediately. He had to make amends because he thought he had found the answer. And that answer was that Lin Jin was curator's disciple. That was why the curator was angry today. He knew who Lin Jin was and that Lin Jin was targeting him. That was why he was angry. That was close. Fortunately, he figured it out. Otherwise, things would have been irreparable. There was still a chance now. As long as he tried his best, he could salvage the curator's impression of him. Seeing that Yi Yuzhou was about to leave, the others panicked. Old Yi, you're being mean. Did you think of something? Tell us so we can help you decide, Heya suddenly said. If those who were familiar with him saw the current Heya, their jaws would definitely drop. In the visitation hall, Heya wasn't that terrifying killer or the cold-faced king of hell. Right now, he was more like an average person with a burning desire for gossip. Senior Yi, don't go. He Qing tried to stop him but to no avail. Madame Ghostchild sighed. Forget it. He must have figured out the reason but he doesn't want to talk about it. Maybe he's afraid that the curator will blame him. Let's not ask anymore. Madame Ghostchild no longer looked like the villainous expert who would go on a killing spree at the slightest provocation. Those who didn't know her might think she was just an average young married woman. It wasn't just her. In fact, most of the people present felt more at ease and relaxed in the visitation hall. They didn't have to worry about the scheming and grudges of the outside world. After a few simple sentences, He Qing actually wasn't afraid of Madame Ghostchild anymore. She realized that there was no need for her to be afraid of her. The reason was simple. This was the visitation hall. Unless they weren't afraid of offending the curator, they had to behave. Therefore, it was actually very safe in the visitation hall. By the way, which one of you is in Nonly state? I need an herb there to refine pills. Heya suddenly asked. After a brief silence, Jiang Ziki, who was relatively quiet, said, What herb do you need? Snake scale vine. I need its roots. Heya said to Jiang Ziki. Jiang Ziki nodded. I'll bring some for you next time. Thanks. Right after Heya said that, Jiang Ziki said, "It's not free. You have to do something for me. Have you heard of apricot river aged wine?" Heya was surprised. "You want a drink? It's been a while. Bring me a pot the next time you're here." Jiang Ziki licked his lip. He did look like a drunkard who hadn't had a drink in a long time. Heya didn't ask why Jiang Ziki didn't go himself. Since the other party said so, it meant that they were in a place where he couldn't get his hands on alcohol. Heya wasn't a person who liked owing favors. Since Jiang Ziki wanted wine, he would bring him a bucket. He Qing's eyes lit up as she listened. Clearly, she had discovered another important function of the visitation hall. It was a platform for visitors like them to communicate with each other. This platform allowed them to obtain things that they couldn't normally get their hands on. Moreover, they didn't have to worry about the other party refusing to pay. They wouldn't dare. If the curator found out, he might be unhappy. Hence, it had